So good. You?
Doing well, thank you.
Awesome. I think I had to just kind of like decompress after that conference. And so I like went into my room and got the fetal position for a little bit. And Jen's like, "What's going on, Matt?" And I'm like, "Oh, we're gonna be fine. We're gonna be fine, but I'm feeling better today."
And make sure you're.
So-
Yeah, I told Rex, everything's
Welcome to the Independent Redistricting Commission's meeting tonight, this afternoon. We're delighted to have with us a number of guests. One of whom I want to make sure introduce all of you to is Katie Wright. Katie's the new Executive Director of Better Boundaries. She is replacing Noah, who's taking off to go to law school. So wish him well in that endeavor. We have a few introductions that we'd like to make today. We hope that you notice that we have a much fuller contingent of staff today. Our intern population has been growing. We're delighted to have some new folks with us. And so I'm going to ask Joey, Julianne, and Cassidy to introduce themselves. Just tell us where they're from and where they've gone to school or where they are going to school. So we'll go ahead and start with Joey.
Okay, everybody, I'm Joey. I'm a new intern. I'm not as new. I started 2-ish weeks ago, but this is my first official meeting with you. I am a sophomore at Utah State University, majoring in political science. I haven't chosen what I'm going to minor in yet. I'm still deciding and exploring a little bit. I was born and raised in Idaho, and then I lived in St. George for a while. And now I'm back up in Logan attending Utah State, and I look forward to working with everybody.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm Julianne, and like Joey, I go to Utah State University. I'm not as new as Joey, though. I'm finishing up my last year. I'm studying public relations and recreation resource management. It's a double major, and it's lots of fun. I've enjoyed it and learned lots of skills. I'm from North Ogden, Utah, born and raised there, lived there my whole life. And I'll be moving down to Salt Lake City when I finish my internship and when I finish my schooling. So nice to meet you. Look forward to working with you.
I'm Cassidy. So I actually was born here in Utah, but then grew up in Reno, Nevada. I went to BYU for my undergraduate degree. I studied political science and communication. So that was really fun. I enjoyed that. Then I worked for LRGC for a couple of years as an administrative assistant. And then I went off to grad school at Purdue University. And I've been working on my master's degree in communication. I studied political communication apprehension, and I'm finishing up my thesis right now, and I should graduate in August. I have a countdown. I'm super excited, but that's where I was most recently. And then I just started on Monday, so I'm very new.
Very new, but already quite productive. We have some terrific work that all of our staff have done, so we're very appreciative of that. The next item we have on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of June 29th. We'll receive those in an email. Are there any corrections, changes, additions that anybody would like to see made? No?
Move we adopt the minutes.
Have a motion? Second. Have a second. We have, before I forget, we have Commissioner Thorne online with us this afternoon. And so, as we have done when we have people online, we'll do a roll call vote. We'll start to my left with Commissioner Hilliard. So, aye. Baylor? Aye. Aye. Commissioner?
Aye.
Commissioner Bishop? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And Commissioner Thorne?
Aye.
That was an aye, Commissioner Thorne as well. So thank you very much. We now have the opportunity to have a general legal discussion with our attorney, Matt Cannon, and I think he's recovered from the scare that we all received as we enjoyed the redistricting conference last year, but heard about litigation and all kinds of interesting things. So that's going to ease our minds or make us more worried. I'm not sure which. So.
That all depends. Well, as always, it is a pleasure to be with the commission. And in particular today, I do feel like the topic that we're going to discuss strikes at the heart of the commission's work. And I feel that what has been presented to you with the proposed criteria and standards for discussion today, a lot of thought and effort has gone into that, and I think should serve as a nice foundation for future work of the commission. So I've got a PowerPoint slide that's going to follow along very closely with what you've been handed. And what you've been handed is a 16-page document that outlines the threshold criteria and redistricting standards that this commission is charged with defining, adopting, and utilizing in connection with their map drawing exercises. And so as far as the roadmap for the presentation, we're going to first discuss the 5 threshold criteria and then follow that with the redistricting standards. We're then going to pivot after this presentation to discuss legislative privilege. Received a request from Chair Facer to provide some follow-up discussion. I think we all, or many of us, heard that discussion at the conference and had some questions as to whether or not that applies and to what extent that may apply. As far as the threshold criteria are concerned, we're here then in the Redistricting Act, Section 302, Subpart 4, which provides the 5 criteria to which the commission must comply. And what we've done is, and I'd like to acknowledge a couple of our summer clerks here with me today. Aaron and Vince from Ray Quinney have been very helpful in scouring the country with all things commission and it's these criteria and standards and trying to find what's going to be the most efficient and effective standards that can be adopted by this commission. There was also a team effort from many at the firm in trying to provide the commission with this solid foundation of principles and criteria on which we can base our work going forward. So we're going to address first the 5 threshold criteria. And here's proposed criterion 1. And before I go into that, our thought was that it would be most efficient and helpful if we were to post this for public comment and provide the public 3 weeks or so to provide input on these proposed standards. Also gives you as commissioners time to formulate what may or may not be the standards to which you feel comfortable in following. We also have some practical limitations with respect to what can actually be implemented given budgetary and limited resources as far as certain methods and software and expert use that we'll get into. So that's the general idea of this 16-page document. And I'm just going to go through each of these relatively quickly, but the hope is that you can take these and study them and we can come back to decide whether this is the route you'd like to go. So as far as the first proposed criterion, this addresses something we've discussed in prior meetings, and that's the legislative redistricting principles. And so the proposed criterion is that the commission will submit maps that comply with the redistricting principles as adopted by the legislative redistricting committee. These redistricting principles have been incorporated into proposed criteria 2, 3, and 4. And as we've discussed, we have these parallel tracks where the legislative committee is also in the process of preparing maps. They've adopted certain redistricting principles. And our view, based on our prior discussions and from a practical standpoint, is that any map that we submit as a floor should satisfy any and all redistricting principles created by the legislative committee. And as always, if you have questions, please jump in and discuss. We do have a lot to go through, and I apologize, but I do feel like this is really going to be the meat of our work going forward, and again is going to provide us a solid foundation of our future conduct in drafting these maps. The proposed criteria number 2 addresses population deviation, and here we see immediately one of the distinctions between what our statute requires of the commission and then what the legislative committee has adopted as their principles. But what we're proposing here is that the commission will only submit maps that are drawn using the official population enumeration of the most recent decennial census. Each district will be drawn using the total population figure of the most recent decennial census. The commission will make a good faith effort to achieve numerical equality across districts. For congressional districts, the total population deviation shall not exceed plus or minus 0.1%. And for state house, state senate, and state school board, the total population deviation shall not exceed plus or minus 5%. The term total population deviation is defined in Utah Code 10302B. So one notable difference is, as I've mentioned, the legislative committee has adopted the standard of 0.1% deviation for congressional districts. We believe that that would be then wise as far as any deviation that this commission comes through with a map to at least meet that criteria to better ensure that the legislature would consider adoption of that type of map. The U.S. Supreme Court has rejected an exact standard for permissive population variation. Did so in Karcher v. Daggett, basically just saying they need to be as equal as possible. And we've had prior discussions on that. This year it is a multiple of 4, the total population. So in theory, there could be a 0 deviation if there were equal numbers in all 4 congressional districts. In any event, the ceiling for us is that 0.1% deviation. The next proposed criterion addresses federal and state law. And this one provides that the commission will not use race as a predominant factor in drawing district lines, and any map submitted shall comply with the United States Constitution, all applicable federal laws, including Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. In evaluating the requirements of this subsection, the commission shall rely on the current precedent of the United States Supreme Court, the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, and where applicable, the Utah Supreme Court. Now, under this standard, it's essentially saying we're committed to abiding by all applicable laws. There is obviously no exact definition, but the idea is that the commission will review each map submitted to the state legislature to verify it is in compliance with all federal and state law. The fourth of the fifth 5 criteria is a single member districts and contiguity. And once again, we're talking about the threshold requirements. These are what, for the most part, the legislature will be bound by. This is where the Supreme Court has especially ruled on these particular areas. And this is one area where federal law requires, as does our statute, that single member districts are drawn and that there be contiguity between those districts. So the commission will only, or within those. So this one reads that the commission will only recommend maps in which each district in each map is a single member district. And a single member district is defined as an electoral district represented by a single office holder rather than 2 or more office holders. Furthermore, each district will be contiguous, meaning that no part of a district can be entirely separated from the remainder of that district. As far as the issue of being contiguous, this essentially means that all parts of a district must be connected at some point with the rest of the district. And ever since Shaw v. Reno, the United States Supreme Court has considered contiguity as a process in analyzing maps. And our final threshold.
I've got to ask
Yes.
a question about that.
Yes, sir.
In continuity, has there been any statement about whether water constitutes making a district contiguous or not?
And there has been case law on that issue, and they do account for geographic boundaries such as waters, mountain ranges, of things. But with the water, it's essentially created that the district must be encompassing the entire, that they can't be, like if they're on 2 sides of the water, I think is the best way to say it, that actual body of water would need to be drawn within that district. Or they would have to reach that district from around the water.
So you can't have Twilla and Davis County in the same district. If there's not another way of getting from
if there's not a contiguous avenue by land to get to each part of the district, then I think that would be potential violation of the contiguous requirement.
If I could follow up with that question, we currently have the senators. Oh, yeah, sorry. If I follow up with that question, we currently have state senate seats, I know, that include Box Elder County and Tooele County. I guess they're contiguous west of the Great Salt Lake. To my knowledge, there's no roads between them. To get there, you have to go through Davis, Salt Lake County, and get to Tooele. I had a Senate district in Logan that I had part of Summit County. And I felt comfortable because Summit County and Rich County are so much alike at the time. But to get to Summit County from Rich County, you have to drive through Wyoming, or I have to go through these other counties to get to that county. So you're telling me that's not legal to do it like that, even though they're contiguous, they touch each other through land. You don't drive west of the Great Salt Lake to go from Fremont to Tooele.
And I think I misspoke a little bit. As long as there is a landlock, regardless of whether you can drive on that land to each of those areas, that would, I think, satisfy the contiguous requirement because there is a connection. And presumably you could walk, you could do other things. Now, practically, obviously, that's not the case, that you're going to be driving through various districts to get back into the same district. But the requirement, as I understand it, is it just has to be connected. The whole piece has to be connected such that you can't leave and go back into it and have it separated. And so I think that how it's been in the past is satisfies the contiguous requirement, even though you had to drive through various areas to get there. Any other questions on that concept? The next one is reasonably compact. And this is the fifth and final proposed criterion. And this has gone through a few iterations as we've tried to understand exactly what the best proposed standard for this commission would be. And this is what, in consultation with Professor Pursley, we believed gives the commission the most accurate and flexible definition of compactness. The commission shall, to the extent practicable, submit maps with districts that are reasonably compact. Compactness means that districts shall avoid odd shapes or contortions that cannot be explained by other legitimate redistricting criteria. Now, I think this is the first area where we start getting into the nuance of each of these criteria and understanding the various ways that they can be measured and judged. The general requirement is that each map type must be reasonably compact in each district in that map, but there's no universally agreed upon definition of compactness. And unlike contiguity, where it's either contiguous or it's not, compactness is obviously not a binary concept. Nevertheless, courts regularly consider compactness and have done so under various standards, but there is no general federal standard for compactness that we can point to or adopt to say, okay, this is what the federal courts require. I think the language cited above, as far as that definition, is what encapsulates the spirit and the letter of most of the law with respect to compactness at this point, and provides kind of the guiding framework for our discussion on compactness. And you'll notice in the handout, under each of these proposed criterion is a discussion section that addresses the case law, other states' interpretation or application of these type of issues. And this will also be included for the public so that they can be, one, educated and also provide additional insights as they may see fit.
Matt, if I may,
Yes.
You use the word practicable here, and I want to make sure that we all understand the difference between practicable and practical. And so if you could help us, because I know, for example, on the one person, one vote standard, this language is used as well, and it has some specific interpretation by the court.
That's a great question, Sharon. I think what is embedded and used with these words is this notion of reasonableness. and understanding that all things don't fit perfectly. And we have bodies of water, we have rivers, we have roads, we have, areas that are perfectly compact, perfectly contiguous. I guess there could be it's either contiguous or not, but that notion of practicable being, they recognize with geography, there's going to be strange looking things. And a district, and I think there was a presentation earlier to this commission a few months ago before we were involved, where I don't know if it was Justin Levitt or someone else gave a presentation and showed a district with the water taken out so you couldn't see why it moved the way it did. And you looked at that and said, that doesn't look compact at all. And then you overlay the geography on there and realize, well, it wraps around a lake there. So yes, this would be compact under those circumstances. And I think that's what the word practicable is it gives you that discretion and the reasonableness to say, look, we're finding the best measures that we can for compactness, recognizing that perfect compactness, that perfect mat that Professor Pursley discussed just doesn't exist. Does that answer that question?
Well, I think so. And I think, the issue that I want to make sure I'm clear on is it doesn't just mean that we go, that seems reasonable, right? That seems good enough. But it means that we made, I think the language you used was good faith efforts to make it as, for example, in this one, as compact as possible. That we didn't just say, we don't have to think very much about it. But it really involves some effort on our part.
Excellent. And I'm glad you brought the discussion there, because on the flip side of that coin of the discretion is the fact that, well, there are ways to measure this, and courts do measure this. And there are certain mathematical methods that can be deployed to say, how compact is this? And are there other ways to be more compact? And so you're absolutely right that just because we look at a map and from the eye test say, oh, looks fine to us, I think there's a higher burden and a standard to explain, okay, this is why we think this is compact. And one of the themes to our discussion will be, okay, what type of technology and software will be at our disposal to help us make those type of quantitative analyses? Will we have that type of ability? There's various ways that compactness is measured, and in your literature, you've seen a description of the dispersion-based methods. And this is where I think Justin Levitt and Erica Wood have provided a presentation to us about the various ways that you can measure compactness. And they've created mathematical models, and political scientists have come up with really 100 different technical measures of compactness. And so our job as a commission is we have this general reasonably compact criterion, and within that deciding, okay, how do we really qualitatively or quantitatively or both measure that? And we've for the time being left out a specific requirement for a quantitative type analysis, but that would certainly be something. And if we get some input from those who have dealt with this before that say, hey, we found this to be really a helpful quantitative type analysis, I think that's where the public input may be helpful for us to say, hey, this is great. And whether it's the Citygate software or some other type of, if the Esri software has that capabilities, just understanding how we can then explain to the legislature and the courts if necessary, how we determine compactness here.
No, I would think it would seem logical. It would seem logical that if compactness is not there, there has to be a logical reason for it. For example, if we were actually to prioritize what we're dealing with here, what's one thing we haven't done, and say that numerical equality is the highest priority, then obviously changing compactness to make sure there's a numerical equality would be an obvious thing to do it. So in my first district for Congress, the boundaries snake through the avenues. It looked terrible, but the total difference in population from all three districts is one person. And it snaked through there to create the one person. So there was a higher need than compactness. And that was numerical equality, which is something we need to make some formal statement of where these priorities take place at some point. And when you presented, how you had to realign districts, there were reasons for doing that, and it was numerical equality. So reasonable makes sense here, but what we have to do is, if it's not compact, there has to be a logical reason for not making it compact.
Exactly. And I think that last line encapsulates your exact point, Commissioner, is that if it does have an odd shape or something snaking through the avenues, it needs to be explained by other legitimate redistricting criteria. And so that's exactly to your point of, well, there's a reason for this, is because to get the numerical equality. And that's where I think that comes in. Now, as far as the rank order of this, there's been a lot of discussion.
Mr. Hilliard, did you also?
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner
I
Hilliard,
want
you
to
have a
take you back
question?
to the population deviation, if you're ready to go back there. But
Microphone?
it is.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
You sounded so quiet.
I want to go back to that, and let me just assume for my example that we use a 50,000 population district and we have a 10% deviation. Would the 10% mean that you could go down to 4,500, which would be, or 45,000, which would take the 50 down 10%, and you go up to 55, so that you have a 10% deviation from the base? Or does the total deviation have to be 10%? So you could use 52,500 up and put 47,500 down. Is the 10% deviation, or in this case, is 5%? Does that go half of that on each side, or does it go a total amount on each one?
That's a great question. And it is confusing, and they use the terms deviation in a way that doesn't make sense at times. And so that's a great question. And what the law requires is a total of 10%. So you take, let's say 4 districts, you take the lowest populated district and the highest populated district, and you have a 10% buffer with respect to the state house, the state senate, and the school boards. So under your example, it would be a 45 and a 55,000 district. Let's say you had a 55,000 and a 45. That would fall within the plus or minus 5%, with the median being 50%. And so it's a total of 10 from your most populated to your least populated. And so if the average is 50,000, you could have one that was 55,000 and one that was 45,000. So does that answer that question? Any other questions on compactness? I think this discussion obviously leads to this notion of how tricky it is. And I think we're also reminded of what Professor Pursley presented in his presentation about the trade-offs, that there is no perfect map. And if you find the most compact district, it's very likely that that district is not going to score high and honor some of these other criteria to the full extent possible. And so throughout this process, it's a challenge and our task of trying to find what that appropriate trade-off is going to be, recognizing that with certain threshold requirements and criteria, there's an actual bright line that needs to be met. Yes, Commissioner Baker.
I kind of think the word compact has been up a little bit too much. Okay, if we pursue compactness too much, we're going to miss other criteria. We're going to miss communities of interest. We're going to miss other relevant criteria. We may have a district that looks like the shape of a human hand, but if there's legitimate reasons, then I wouldn't shy away from it at all. So my encouragement, I guess, to the commission is let's not worry too highly about the shape being compact. We're going to get some opportunity to make some really unusual shaped districts. All of us are going to see that probably more than once. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as we have the justification for it.
Right, and I think something to keep in mind as we go forward, as far as where maps get challenged and they're successful challenges, is where somebody comes and says, look, I can meet all your other purported legitimate redistricting criteria that you've said, in a more compact map. So that's going to be the question for any court or any analysis or potential challenge is, hey, I understand why you drew it that way to get these community interests or whatever reasons. I can encompass those same communities of interest and do it in a compact way. So the cases on compactness tend to follow that type of analysis where they come in. Now, you know, there's always some give and take, a lot of issues on that, but Commissioner Baker.
I hope we can find those shapes before someone else does. Yeah, so that's, I would think that to be a goal of ours.
Right. Well, thank you. And these are all excellent comments, and I'm glad we're all just kind of thinking along those lines of the interplay between each of these criteria, because it is a difficult task and a balancing task. And the good news is it gets even harder for us, because now after the threshold criteria, you as a commission have 6 specific redistricting standards that you by law must also adopt, define, and utilize in drawing the maps. And this is under the Redistricting Act, Section 302, Subpart 5. And these are the then additional 6 considerations that you as a commission have that other bodies may not have. So number 1, the communities of interest. This one is a fairly common criterion standard utilized by a number of commissions. And with that said, there's really no uniform definition. And so what we've done again is scoured all the literature, all the commissions, and trying to find a definition that seems to be aligned with what we've heard from the commission. And this is our current draft that provides the commission shall, to the extent practicable, preserve communities of interest. And so that's the statutory language. We go on to define that to say community of interest is defined as a group of people in a contiguous geographic area that share common policy interests, whether cultural, religious, social, economic, or others that do not necessarily coincide with the boundaries of a political subdivision. A community of interest cannot be based on a relationship with a political party, particular incumbent, or certain political candidates.
So if I could, then we couldn't say we want to put this area because it's Democrats. We want to put these Democrats together, and that's their community of interest. We could not use that criteria.
That is correct. That is
or Republican or whatever.
correct. It can't be based on a political party, any particular politician. Yes, Chair Facer.
I think, yeah, I just have a language question. The last sentence there says relationship with political party, particular incumbent, or certain political candidates, which suggests that there are only particular political candidates that are at issue. Does that really mean individual political candidates or identified political candidates?
That's a great question, and I do see that issue, and we may want to discuss whether that qualifier is appropriate or necessary, because it does imply a section of
some are and some
political
aren't.
candidates, and whether certain means those who are certain to be candidates or certain as being, well, specific type of candidate. So I think that does raise issues, and I think that the concept that we were trying to get is probably just political candidates generally without the certain. So I think that may be one way of addressing that.
Thank you.
Great point on that. So there's no generally agreed upon way to define community of interest. A number of states use this and have devoted a lot of time and energy to that. And we've seen some great things across the country from other state commissions who have really sought the public input. And this is in the last round, but then also in this round through a number of the states as they've done their best to try to define, recognize, and to the best that they can respect those communities of interest. In the discussion materials on here, on page 7 of 16, there's a few things I think worth noting. The first is, just recently in the special session, the Utah legislature identified and honored the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities, highlighting the importance of the communities in the state of Utah, condemning the attacks perpetrated specifically against them, and encouraging education and empathy. And so the legislature recognized that the state of Utah, and this is quote, is home to the 5th largest Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander population in the nation, with nearly 38,000 individuals. And that Salt Lake City and West Valley City, quote, have the largest and 2nd largest population of Tongans of any city in the United States. So here's a couple examples of potential communities of interest in Utah to be preserved and respected, and one way to identify. We're obviously through this process devoting a lot of time and energy in trying to identify what those communities are, and learning from the public is how they define that. We feel like this definition is purposely broad such that it allows us to listen to the people and the commission to understand, okay, what do you view as your community of interest? How would you draw your community of interest? It does give also some direction to say, look, you can't give me polka dots, of small things. There needs to be contiguous. And I guess you could have various communities of varying size, but the concept of any practical use by us as a commission is there needs to be some sort of geographic boundary for these communities.
I have a question. I talked to the Logan City Council. They were talking about creating districts for their 5 elected officials to run the city. And I raised the issue of students. I said about students being represented. One of the council members said, we looked at that and we found students were scattered through the whole city. There is, obviously there are some students in student housing, but when you look at overall, they're pretty well scattered all over. And I remember what they said about the state of Massachusetts. There's 30% of Republicans, but they're so evenly spread across the state that there's no way you could sit down and draft a district that would be solely Republicans. And so I wonder, when you talk about the Tongans or the Native Americans or wherever they may be, maybe easy out in the Duchesne area or out in the Grand County area, but I wonder how widespread. And again, if you have to bring into a district of in the House, I guess they're going to be about 50,000 per seat. How you really do that?
And that's a great question, and that goes to the demographics of the state, and we're still waiting, for that August 16th census data to come out and to be analyzed to see whether there is any population that would rise to meet the criteria where it could be a majority minority district, such as the Latino.
Explain that to us. What is a minority majority district? What does it mean to us as we look at it?
Well, that's a great question. So far in the state, there's not been a minority population that has risen to the level or has the critical mass that would implicate what people in the redistricting field call the majority minority district. Essentially, that there are so many minorities in a particular area that they would constitute the majority of that particular district. Now, with this new census data, there is some suggestion in the growth of the Latino community that in Salt Lake there may be, and so we're waiting to see whether or not then we need to account for those types of issues. And that triggers a few additional responsibilities for the commission or anyone drawing lines to acknowledge and cater to that. And that's where we're getting into Professor Pursley's wheelhouse a little bit with, you may have heard the terms racial polarization analysis or other type of analysis to understand the voting history and account for a few extra things that you otherwise wouldn't have to account for if they were so dispersed that you wouldn't create that type of district. And so short answer is, thus far in the state, our demographics have never created one of those districts where that type of consideration needs to be made. It's very possible, if not likely, that will remain the case, but we will not know until after the census data comes whether there is that critical mass within a small enough geographic area where we would need to make those type of calculations and considerations.
Another question. In Logan, there's an area I understand that has quite a few Somalians. they're refugees. They're, I don't believe, registered to vote. They're not, certainly not citizens, but they are a very important part of our community. I don't know if there's enough of them that they would raise to the level of having a district, but they don't vote. Can you create a district of people who are not registered and don't vote because they're refugees?
I don't have a specific answer to that question, but what I can say, or as to whether those can be considered as far as, well, let me back up here. It goes to the population data, and the data we're going to get is that general population. And based on that general population, are there going to be a critical mass of any minority population that there could be some sort of district or something that should be accounted for with respect to that district? Now, you can certainly account for it with a community of interest analysis, and if you can, try not to split some sort of minority group or Somalian group so that they're in separate districts to try to give them at least more of a voice. That's certainly something that is at the discretion of the commission. I think part of this community of interest analysis. But as far as that particular example, those numbers are so small, it's not even, we're talking that even the Pacific Islanders, as far as that number, that still doesn't quite rise to the level in a geographic area where you would, at least thus far, have to consider those type of minority majority districts.
It would seem that with the numbers we are dealing and the inability of defining what a community of interest is, which also is a problem because that means anyone can define it the way they wish to, and it still fits on our criteria. The smaller the district, the more difficult it will be to find those community of interest and put them geographically together. So that in the House and the state districts, you're going to have a hard time of doing that because they don't all live together. If they did, if we had ghettos all over the place, that would be an easy thing to do, but we don't have that in Utah. It would seem that the larger districts, like the state school board and the congressional ones, are where you can find an area of getting community of interest to be put together, simply because the wider dispersion they have with with the contamination that would be in that geographical area would be covered in a wider district. So even though we may find we will eventually have some minority majority districts, probably in the state legislature, it could be very possible that would be there. It is less likely to happen than it would be in a larger setting, like a congressional district, where you could get the dispergence of different kinds of people with others mixed in with that and still have a community of interest concept. It nonetheless still is frustrating, at least to me, that this phrase has no definition to it, which means that can give us flexibility in the future. It could also rise to the level of problems in the future where some people try to impose a definition of community of interest. It is fortunate, though, that it specifically eliminates political interests as a potential community of interest. That's the only good thing about what we have so far.
Well, it is a tricky area, and I think to address your concerns and points, which are very well taken, the commission has the ability and in fact the direction from the statute, like it or not, to create that definition that it is going to use in considering these maps and trying to preserve those communities of interest, which is obviously a very tall task. And we've provided a number of materials from other definitions from various commissions throughout the country. And hopefully there's something there that may resonate with you that says, okay, I can get my arms around this. I can understand what this means. I can, be able to apply that.
Many options may not be positive.
And that could be the case. They're all over the map as far as how commissions have chosen to define communities of interest, but finding something that you feel comfortable with and that can be practical and useful in the process of preserving those type of communities, I think is going to be a tall order. And that one perhaps even more than all the other criteria, just because of the emphasis that's been put on that throughout by other commissions, and just going to be an ongoing thing. But I guess hopefully the concern of someone trying to impose that we could counter by saying we only have to adhere to what we as a commission decide to define. And just because someone else says, hey, you're not accounting for mine, you know, that they won't have a complaint against us, at least from a legal standpoint. Essentially, what we're trying to do is craft the best way to define these communities, to respect them in the district line drawing process and preserve those communities. And then here, I just want to touch on the third paragraph down on page 7 of 16 that says the purpose of adopting a definition of community of interest is not to create a clear legal standard. Rather, as operationalized by other commissions, the definition is designed to encourage residents to define their community as they see it. It might be unrealistic to expect a member of the public to draw 75 state house seats and all the other districts, but it's more realistic to ask people to define the community in which they live and with which they identify. And then how we account for that and how we respect that will obviously be dictated on what those boundaries are and how we view that community. Okay, moving on, unless there's any other questions, I'm sure we'll be coming back to this in subsequent meetings.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the meeting that Chair Basis sent out to us a few months ago, I read of one community of interest in Southern California, in the mountainous areas of Southern California, in which local citizens banded together because of the high fire danger in the area in which they live. And there had been a lot of fires, and there was potential for a lot more fires. And so the community banded together, and they were able to legally create a district based on that standard that they were all concerned about fire danger.
Right.
So it's not just.
No, and that might even.
Here, I like the word.
Oh.
Did you change
Yeah,
slides?
back a
Oh,
slide.
okay.
Oh,
I like the word other in there. So I think that would easily fall into the other category. It's not just related to fire danger. There's probably hundreds of different ways that a community come together and identify themselves.
right. And I think that might fall into the policy interest with respect to resources towards fire prevention. That it could also go to the economic, depending on the impact there. So I do think this initial proposed definition is broad enough to capture that. And also I want to make clear, we're not talking about, hey, do you have a community of interest that we can just then draw a district for? It's the idea of preserving these communities, that if there is a choice between drawing a line that goes right through a particular community or drawing a boundary that encompasses the entire community, I think it's the latter that is the charge of the statute, of trying best to preserve these communities of interest, to allow them to have that collective voice, even if they're well short of the majority, which the vast majority will be of those communities. They'll make up a small part of whatever district, even if it is likely a House or a Senate or one of the smaller districts. The idea is, okay, if we have a contiguous geographic identified community of interest, is there a way to preserve that, to give them and maximize their voice? And I think that's the charge here. All right, something a little easier, let's hope. We all need it, right? We all need a win here. Geographic boundaries. So the proposed standard is that the commission shall, to the extent practicable, follow natural, geographic, or man-made features, boundaries, or barriers when drawing district boundaries. The geographic boundary means natural barriers such as mountain ranges, significant rivers or large lakes, and other bodies of water. A man-made feature refers to prominent aspects of the built or human-designed environment, including streets, freeways, and census tracts. The commission intends to qualitatively evaluate this standard. So once again, as required by subsection 302, the commission, to the extent, again, practicable, and we've talked about this give and take with things, are to follow the natural, geographic, or man-made features, boundaries, or barriers when drawing maps. This is a fairly common requirement through the country and is a little more straightforward than communities of interest, but happy to fill any questions on this if you have it.
I do struggle with the census tracts standard there. In the presentation I gave to the commission a few months ago, census tract boundaries, if taken exactly where they're drawn by the census, they're going to create problems. I'm wide open to looking at what the census tract generally represents. So for example, a freeway is going to have census tracts on either side of it. But the census tract boundaries are going to zigzag, crisscross a little bit here and there, this freeway. And
Go through houses, you showed us.
and, oh yeah, very much so. And so I struggle with the idea that we're gonna follow census tract boundaries exactly. But like I say, I'm wide open to shifting our boundaries to follow the intent of this census tract boundary. Follow it exactly, it's gonna lead to problems, big problems.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Baker. And I think, once again, this is now in your hands to determine whether that's a necessary element. I think including that was more as an example of certain features that to me personally doesn't strike at the heart of the policy and the principle of geographic boundaries, that even eliminating census tracts may be something that would be appropriate in your eyes. I'm not aware of any federal law or litigation that is based on a census tract type of geographic boundary violation or anything like that. But I'll double check that to make sure there's any legal implication, but I'm not aware of that. That's a great point.
I'll show you that presentation later.
I would appreciate that. All right, we're getting there. Four more actually. Proposed standard 3, cores of prior districts. Once again, these first lines are exactly what is contained in the statute of what the act is telling the commission to do. And the commission shall, to the extent practicable, preserve cores of prior districts. Yes.
Is the point of that predictability and stability? What is that it? Or is there any other basis for?
Yes, I think that's part of it. The continuity of representation, the predictability, understanding, and also the notion of when people know who their representatives are and have a history with them, that there's going to be more voter turnout, more participation. That's I think the concept behind it is that notion.
That could overlap with incumbency protection though. I mean, it seems to me that the stability of the district makes sense in terms of the community. But if it's tied to the identity of the representative in the district, that it seems to me gets pretty close to the problem of incumbency protection.
Absolutely. And this is a tension that's going to have to be carefully navigated by the commission in identifying first what those core districts are, and then how to handle perhaps an incumbent who's maybe on the outskirts of that core as defined by the commission, or separating that to the extent possible. And so there is a tension there. I know it seems to me, my understanding is that the legislature is actually putting the location of each incumbent on their maps that they're drawing. And whether that's something we can do, I don't think so. I don't think that's part of our charge and statutory requirements in drawing this. But this concept of preserving the core districts, I think that's what you've noted, is that continuity. There's some other justifications that we've put in those materials too for that. That you become more familiar with the boundaries, more familiar with people who are within your district, and also that the representative increasingly understands that area as well. I think is part of some of the literature I've read.
One difference is on Congress, you don't have to live in your district. Ben McAdams did not live in his district. Neither currently Blake Moore does not live in his district. So you can serve in Congress without living in it. So when you draw boundaries, you're not really is per se protecting the incumbent. The Utah Constitution requires legislators have to live in their district. So if we drew, but I think if you kept a district together, as long as you didn't go out and get somebody in here that they did before, got them out there.
Well,
I don't want to know where they live.
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't either.
I would hope, yeah, I would hope we'd never use that criteria. We'd never even look at it.
proposed standard 4, municipalities and counties. This proposed standard provides that the commission will, to the extent practicable, submit maps which minimize the division of municipalities and counties across multiple districts. The term municipality is defined in Utah Code, section 10.1.104, Title 10. The commission will, to the extent practicable, rely on empirical measurements of division. So like a community interest or prior district boundary, creating districts that reflect municipal and county boundaries promotes predictability and representation. It may also facilitate fair and effective representation by grouping certain communities together that are affected similarly by various policy choices. And division among city and county boundaries also provides an important reference point for courts undertaking the predominance analysis and analysis used in racial gerrymandering cases. So that this is, I don't think going to be a large issue on that last, but the former policy questions. One thing that's going to be interesting to consider is some sort of hierarchy of, okay, what's more important, not dividing a city or dividing a county? And you making those type of decisions, and perhaps even seeking, and what we have here is seeking public input as to whether there should be a hierarchy and how this should be measured. Not all divisions are created equal, as we've heard in prior presentations, that you can say, well, only, 2 areas were divided, but those 2 areas were divided in 6 different ways. So on the one hand, it may sound like it was a great result, but for that particular area, it may not be. And so this is once again, this is yet just another example of a criteria that needs to be weighed and with the give and takes of others. But I think the general principle and concept behind it is a good one. Yes.
Would you clarify the last sentence? It says we're to rely on, quote, empirical measurements, unquote. Are there any other kind of measurements?
I guess depends
I'm
on
not
the
sure. I'm just not
definition
quite
of
sure what that means.
measurements. Yeah, quantitative empirical measurements would be something with numbers that you could count, and as opposed to qualitative measurements where it's a color or the eye test or things of that nature. And so I think that the notion here is this criteria, among others, there's a lot of mathematical software and formula that have been used to help aid commissions such as yourself to determine, okay, how well did this score with respect to splitting to municipalities and counties? And I think insofar as we have the ability and resources to utilize those, the better off we are as a commission, and more defensible that map is going to be, as you can actually quantify and provide empirical measurements. Now, that doesn't answer your question whether that's redundant as to whether an empirical measurement. I think the idea is a quantitative type measurement where we could put this into a computer and they could say this scored as a really high on honoring this type of problem, or it scored really low because you're dividing up so many cities.
Now, there are some states, as I understand, that actually have a quantitative target for the maximum number of splits that you could have of counties, for example.
Right.
We don't have any of that, but what I'm hearing you suggest anyway is that we pay attention at least to how many times we split or divide the cities or counties. So again, part of what I'm hearing is that when we do it, we want to make sure we're doing it purposely and not just randomly, I guess, for lack of a better word, but that when we do have a split, that fits communities of interest, it fits, other geographic boundaries or whatever, but that we do these kinds of things with purpose.
Absolutely. I think with the application of any of
For sure.
these,
I think that's where I think, yeah.
anytime you're doing something that is, you know, the opposite of what it's saying, of minimizing, essentially is you're creating those splits. The idea is, okay, that must not have been practicable for the commission not to have done that. And that's where that justification then would come in. Well, we had to look at these other criteria in this particular circumstance based on, you know, what our priorities were for this. And that then justifies that. Now, one of the themes obviously is this idea of quantitative analyses that can be used to help convey that message of, yes, we have looked at this. We have run a bunch of simulations to try to find the minimum ways in which we could divide these. And we've used those resources to not only help craft those maps, but then also convey that message either to the legislature, to the courts, or to the public to say, look, this is scores really high on this. And so insofar as the commission can utilize those types of tests, I think the more defensible and the more credible each of those maps is going to be. Now, obviously, a lot of these require resources and expert analyses that we're operating under a very limited budget. And so we'll have to kind of see what is practicable under this current circumstances. But once again, with municipals and counties, that's the idea, I think, of the empirical measurements. Did that address your question?
Yeah, that's
Commissioner
helpful.
Durham?
Thank you.
Questions? We're coming to the close here.
I do have a question.
You betcha. Go
Would
back
that
to that.
include tribal areas and townships? I assume it would. So dividing up these or minimizing division of tribal lands at townships. There's only a few townships around the state.
And that's a big question. I don't know if I can give a full answer. I do have some experience in dealing with some of the reservation in Cabagre and other U-tribe reservations. And I guess one concept to keep in mind is these are sovereign entities with sovereign land. And so as far as how those are addressed, that's obviously an issue there. I can't speak to whether that would change this type of analysis or how that would overlay, but I'll look into that more because that does raise a good question. Yes.
Well, that's a fascinating question because of course, I assume the census treats all those people as persons under the Constitution and they're counted and they're within our boundaries. So I would assume we've got to find a way to accommodate them in the districting process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Please. Like all of these proposed standards we've talked about have been violated in past maps for this in the entire history of the state of Utah. And it always will be again for the one reason, which is numerical equality. I'm sorry, when it comes to the reservation lands in Utah, we're not talking about areas in which the population is high enough that's going to be a problem. It's going to be, they're all going to be included in one legislative district or one state senatorial district. You're not going to have that kind of situation. That's just the way it's divided in Utah on reservation lands.
Question.
Please.
As you're making your presentation, Matt, let me tell you things that come to my mind, because I know the state and have been involved in it. One of the real unique counties we have in the state of Utah is Summit County. They have 3 school districts. You have South Summit and Camas, North Summit and Colville, and Park City and Park City. They are really vastly different from each other. You want some fun, go up and have a meeting in Summit County, so you're going to combine the 3 school districts. They'll run you out of town on a rail. Now, you can say, because I think my friends, and I know a lot of people in Park City, as you're doing reapportionment, they feel more aligned to Salt Lake. I think they would rather be, and that's crossing a county line to get down to Salt Lake. The problem you get, in my view, when you talk about minorities and people are not being represented is our rural areas. Now, they're not different languages, they're not different races, all of that. When I was first elected to the Senate, we had 9 senators who clearly represented rural areas. Now you really have to stretch it to get to 7. And I'm sure we're going to lose one of those when we now look at the St. George area, the Riverton area, the Utah County area. They're going to take up a district. So one of the things I think we have to be very careful of is if we were to say Park City, we're going to go to Salt Lake, but we need to take North Summit and South Summit with you into Salt Lake. We take that rural area out of them because in all likelihood, nobody's going to be elected from there with Park City and the other Salt Lake area in that area. So when we talk about representing our minority groups, it's easy to identify someone who may be of a different color or different language or whatever it may be. But I think one of the things that we need to do is make sure that the rural area that's shrinking because of what's happening with our economy, that they have some representation. The only thing I tell people that saves the rural community is every time they get a thing on the ballot, most people will vote for it, giving the farmers the green belt exemption, all those things. Because I think most people, even the big cities of Salt Lake, have empathy for the roots of where they grew up. But it really is difficult in the legislature to give them the kind of situation. So I don't know when you talk about minority district and a majority, whether we have to be concerned that we get the rural areas so combined with large areas. Another example is Dave Hinkins. He lives in Emery County. They give him the population, he had to take part of Utah County and put it in his district. Now, he probably represents 7 or 8 different counties, but not enough population he had to bring in there. Some question when they did it, does that mean somebody from Utah County now can run for that Senate seat and win it? And if they do, that destroys one more rural Senate seat. That's never happened, but that's the kind of risk. And I know when they did the congressional districts, and Rob's talked about that, trying to get equal district, one of the arguments was we should have had a donut hole so that Salt Lake County had their representative guaranteed. And then the rest just kind of put it together. And I really appreciated the way they did for districts because you don't have to live in the district. You can run anywhere you may particularly want to run. But I think it's going to be important that you have enough of a mixture that you have people sensitive, not just of Salt Lake, but of Utah. And I don't care if you live in Vernal, or you live in Salt Lake or St. George or Logan, you're concerned about Utah. And I think we have to be careful as we draw lines that we don't get so concerned about certain things that we end up with a legislature with only 4 rural legislators in the Senate. Because that's going to be a minority group. That's not going to have, that's the bigger division in my mind in the legislature than the Republican and Democrat is rural versus urban.
That would seem to be communities of interest, wouldn't it, Lyle?
Would be.
Well, yeah,
Thank you, Commissioner Thorne.
that's a fascinating observation and dead on. I mean, one of the issues that'll be interesting to see what the census data shows with respect to this, but the last time I looked, Utah is one of the most urban states in the country if you measure it by the percentage of our population that lives in an urban area. So you want to talk majority minorities, you know, there are more Republicans than Democrats, and there are a lot more urbanites than there are rural people who consist of rural population. And that's got to be reckoned with. I think that's a really good point.
Excellent points. And I also am just reminded in listening to this type of conversation, what I think is generally understood around the state of why the commission consists of the individuals that it does is to acknowledge those type of issues and to understand the history of the state, to understand the various nuances that need to come into play. I mean, we're talking concepts, but at the end of the day, you know, these realities and to Commissioner Bishop's comment on these things being violated all the time, that there is that practical reality of there needs to be numerical equality. And so he's not wrong in saying, look, to get that numerical equality, there needs to be a sacrifice of something else is often the case. I would stop short of calling it a violation because I think the courts and others recognize, look, those are practical realities that there is no perfect map that's going to adhere all of those. Now, whether it violates it from a legal sense, I would say no, because I think there was enough justification. And I'm not speaking to any particular map, but hopefully the idea is, yes, we have those divisions and we minimize or limit, the harm or the inability to comply with that in a full manner, which I think is what we're seeing here is this balancing test that we keep coming back to as the give and take between the various. And there are some with that, the equal population and that deviation that are going to obviously dictate a lot of these decisions. All right, boundary agreement. This, again, under the statute requires the commission, and the commission will, to the extent practicable, seek boundary agreement among the map types submitted. Specifically, the commission will consider the alignment among the boundaries of the districts for the Utah House of Representatives, the Utah State Senate, the Utah State School Board, and the United States Congress. Now, this is that concept of that perfect nesting doll, which Commissioner Hilliard and I discussed up in Idaho, for example. They have all the Senate districts, and then they divide them in half and have two House districts, House seats within each of those Senates, and they have a perfectly nested structure. Here, obviously, that's impossible because of the numbers, unless they change it to 25 senators, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon. Then obviously there can't be a perfect nesting and boundary agreement. So this, by practical, is going to have to be addressed and won't be perfect alignment.
If I recall, Utah Constitution says there'll be 29 senators and the House will be twice to three times as many. So it could be 58 up to three times 29. And it was before, I think just before we got in, Rob, it was probably, I know it was 69 and they raised it to 75 in one division because they just couldn't fit it together. They needed more space, but the space of the House is such now, I don't think you could ever go, you wouldn't want to go bigger than 75.
That's what I hear is practically they can't fit them.
The 58, have a lot of fun.
Well, once again, this is something where, to the extent practicable, try to seek boundary agreement. I think we all understand the value of that, and it's a similar vein as to other discussions on that. It facilitates election administration as well by avoiding the need for voting precincts with multiple distinct ballot options. And it might also encourage political participation by making it easier for residents to learn and remember who their representatives are just some of the policy justifications that we've seen. And then the final proposed standard is purposeful or undue favoring. The commission will, to the extent practicable, prohibit the purposeful or undue favoring or disfavoring of an incumbent elected official, candidate or prospective candidate for elected office or a political party. In so doing, the commission will consider direct or indirect evidence of intent and, where practicable, quantitative measures. And there's that phrase again, which is probably more appropriate with the quantitative measures, qualifying it of certain tests that have and mathematical equations that have been adopted to help people test this standard. And we provided in your materials there and for the public as well, a number of different types of methods that are used, the lopsided wins, the mean median difference, the efficiency gap, the excess seats test, and the partisan symmetry test. These are all very well-known tests that are utilized to help people understand this concept and test this concept of whether there's been any purposeful or undue favoring of any candidates. Now, just a final thought about we've sought or suggested seeking public comment for each of these. I think we'd recommend a relatively, maybe a 3-week window, 3-4 week window. I think it's likely in the commission's best interest to have this buttoned up and ready to go before, certainly before September. I think it's just gonna be so busy with other things. But providing that opportunity for input, including, I think the input that we might get are from those who have done this, of what type of quantitative methods have been used, what type of software has been used, what type of expert analysis has been used. And we've talked about some of these tests that can be utilized. And we've also talked previously about there's just the cost associated with that. For example, I'm talking to Professor Persley, for example, like a single partisan bias analysis in his experience is somewhere between $100,000 and $150,000 just for that analysis. And that would include a bunch of ensemble plans. Essentially, you create all these other maps to say how else would it be done to see how your map is drawn there. So there's some things that probably just aren't going to be possible, at least currently, given the budgetary constraints. In an ideal world and what the statute is requiring of you, it would obviously be, I think, helpful to have that type of capabilities, both within the software as well as any expert analysis that accompanies that. I think we discussed at the commission meetings this last weekend, or not the commission meetings, excuse me, at the conference, and meeting with some of the others, just what a limited budget that we're working under. When Arizona started, they had started their commission over $10 million for that commission to get that up and running. Colorado this year, I think, has $2 million to produce 3 maps. Michigan's over 13 million for 3 maps. And even New Mexico, I think, is at 1.5 million as an advisory. And so I say that just because we've tried to be mindful of those realities and putting these standards here and not setting ourselves up to say, well, this would be great if we could do that and objectively measure all of these things. But unless we're able to get that software and expert analysis, it's just not going to be possible. And so as we discuss in the coming days and weeks, as far as what criteria the commission feels it wants to adopt and how it wants to define that, I think that needs to be a consideration for that. Any questions about this? This was a huge, I've been up here way too long, but this was, I think, hopefully going to serve this document as the foundation for all the work going forward as far as the criteria and the standards that will be utilized by the commission. Obviously, is modified by any public and input that the commissioners will have over the next few weeks. So I'm happy.
Matt, one of the questions that I have is, as a commission, we can't take any formal action unless we have it on our agenda, right? Do we need to have a formal action to seek additional public comment? So in other words, would there be anything prohibiting us from putting this up on the website, seeking public comment without having taken a formal action of the committee?
I understand, I'll need to double check this, is that the formal action would have to be when the actual adoption at a minimum of the proposed standards and criteria, and that would need to be then noticed and dealt with. I'm not certain that it would be required to get this on the website. So if the commissioners felt within this next week that, hey, we like this, we want to change this and this, but now we're ready to put it on our website, let's get it out to the public, let's show them what we're looking at. I think that would be possible without formal action, but I'll double check that.
So I guess, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was thinking the same thing, if it were possible for us to take this information that you've given us. I mean, if there's anything we want to add or anything to include putting it out to the public, and say that we have a 3-week time limit on being able to get input back from the public and then adopt once we receive input to utilize that and come up with something that is a document that we could vote on perhaps before we receive our census data too. So that could be, 3 weeks, 4 weeks that we give the public time to digest this and offer suggestions.
I would advocate for that approach, giving that time frame, and I think that makes sense.
Other thoughts from members of the commission on seeking input? Please, Commissioner Hilliard.
I agree completely with what Commissioner Hale said. I would not want to adopt it today without having public input to it. But I think if we put it up and ask for public comment, and because time is our biggest enemy. And so I think the longer we wait to do that, the harder it's going to be. So whether we need to wait 3 weeks, whether we need 2 weeks, whatever we need to do. But I think we need to make it up to the public, let public respond.
I just want to express agreement with that view, but also suggest that I'm hard pressed to see why it would be a problem to put it out for informational purposes immediately, since it doesn't have any force of, doesn't bind anybody or anything. It's just some ideas.
Yeah, it definitely will be posted on the public notice website. So there's no reason for us to not
Put it on our.
put it on the website and ask for feedback.
As long as we're not taking action on it.
Commissioner Baker.
I wholeheartedly agree that we need public input on this. I would suggest that whatever date we decide on, we close public input. We give ourselves an additional week or so, probably to digest the information and discuss what is going to be done by the public.
Yeah, can I just give a point of frustration? I agree, getting the input would be well worth it, and you should do it. But what the hell is it going to give us? All of these are legal requirements we have to look at. I mean, you kind of have public saying, well, we'll ignore the federal law section of it because you can't do it. So yeah, get the input, know what people are thinking about. But when it comes right down to it, we've got to look at all of these because either they're in law or they're put in the state statute, which was terribly written. One way or the other, we've got to do all of this crap. The only thing we can do, once again, is prioritize. So we say when there is a conflict between this one and that one, which has the higher priority. And once again, I'm very fearful. We come right down to it, population is the highest priority. And maybe continuity is the highest priority. But yeah, get the input, that's fine, that's wonderful. But at the end of the day, we're gonna have to deal with all this crap anyway.
And to speak to that point, there are certainly statutory or legal requirements that are strict and black and white. And I think underneath those, and as we get into the 6th redistricting committee, after that first line, that's where this universe kind of expands to say, okay, how are you going to define that? And how are you going to employ and do that? Now, does the commission have to? Yes, you have to do this. You have to look at this issue. You have to preserve communities of interest, but as far as what that means and how you go about that, I think there is some flexibility. I'm hopeful there'll be some, helpful comments that will help formulate that. But your point is also well taken that with numerical, if someone says, hey, yeah, you should put 90% of the people up in this district, that's just obviously not possible. So.
I think we've heard a lot, but if you could just briefly on the legislative privilege issue, I'm sure we're all
Yes,
clear on that.
Yeah, and I'm just going to hit that quickly. And I think the big takeaway is it's possible it applies to this commission. But even if it does, I think what we all heard at this conference is how that's been chipped away, especially in the world of redistricting. The federal courts have really been aggressive in acquiring legislative materials, emails, texts, anything related to redistricting over the objection of legislative privilege and immunity. So I just have 3 slides on that. On the legislative privilege. So as some of you are keenly aware, a privilege available to legislatures and their staff It shields information and certain documents broadly defined used by legislators in developing redistricting plans. And so that's the general idea. Okay, you have this legislative privilege. If you're working with your staff and others about a particular map, the general idea is those conversations should be privileged. Now, what we've seen over the last 10 years in particular is that this privilege is certainly not absolute. And it often varies depending on the issues at stake. And with, I would say, the 7 years of litigation in the redistricting world, it's certainly in the federal court, what we're seeing are courts requiring legislators to produce documents, emails, texts that otherwise would have fallen under a privilege. And in fact, that many of them thought was privileged based on this general idea. But for the federal courts have said, well, to get at the heart of whatever the challenge is, whether it's a racial gerrymandering case or something else, courts have been very aggressive, shall we say, in requiring the turnover of those type of documents. So that poses a couple challenges and then practical pointers, I guess. The first challenge is we're talking about a legislative privilege. You're not the legislature. However, you're performing a legislative function, arguably, in the drawing maps. That is a legislative function. And we talked about this earlier. It's a quasi-administrative, quasi-legislative. So there certainly is an argument. And as your attorney, I would certainly advocate, if the occasion arose, that legislative privilege applies to our communications, applies to yours with the staff in all aspects of the map drawing, as well as any other privilege with attorney-client. From a practical standpoint, what I'm telling you and what I understand is that there is a very good chance that certainly in federal court, that those would need to be disclosed in any challenge. And that would be your emails to one another, your text messages to one another, anything related to the map drawing process. And so from a practical standpoint, I think it's that advice that you've heard through all your careers of anytime you put something in writing, just assume that it's going to end up in a court someday, that someone is going to be an exhibit to something. And so we need to be mindful, even with attorneys. That was one of the more sobering aspects in researching this issue is I think that preeminent lawyer on this issue bemoaned the reality that he was deposed recently, where he thought, what a fool am I to think that not only the legislative privilege apply, but I have attorney-client privilege, which the federal court said, sorry, you're going to get deposed and I need to see your emails. And so it's an interesting reality that we're faced with. And I think just the best course of action is obviously to make sure that any communications we have are professional, which they have all been thus far, and I suspect will continue to be, that we're avoiding any offhand comments or even jokes, which don't translate well, which is hard for me because I love to joke. But you look back and jokes don't translate well on emails. And so as much as I'd like to say we could count on that privilege, I wouldn't count on it. And I would assume that everything you're saying, if there's particular issues that you feel like should be best discussed over the phone, which there are obviously those situations arise, pick up your phone and call me, or send me an email that says, call me, Matt. And then let's have those types of conversations. Otherwise, you're at the risk of this being such a public situation and the way the courts are going, that it could be shown. This balancing test, I won't go into it. I'll make these slides available to you so you can look into that. But I do think that those were the big two key takeaways for our discussion. And yes, please.
One thing, I know I got a grandma request when I was in the legislature. As I recall, they wanted the last 10 years of all emails, texts that I had done involving the budget. And I'd done the budget for those 10 years. And I mean, I could have spent a year trying to go back and collect everything and what was relevant, what wasn't, and all of that. I think the legislature has a provision that if it's going to be burdensome, they can go back to the requester and say, we'll get you that information, but it's going to take somebody 55 hours to do that at $200 an hour, you want to pay that money, we'll get it done for you. I don't know whether that applies to our commission, and maybe that's not in place anymore, but I think I don't mind reasonable requests. When I saw that, I said, holy cow, is that all I'm going to do now for the next year is try to answer this? And the other question that came up is that we try to give special benefits to newspaper or reporters because they've got a job to do. But you get a lot of people ask you for grandma requests who are bloggers or they're not really in the broadcast industry that we'd see, but they feel like they should have the same privilege of having every provided them free. You may want to just take a look at what the legislature has in that area. So if you get a request like that, you can have some defense. Yeah, the unreasonable request.
That's great. I appreciate that point. And as we've discussed with the grandma, to answer your question and provide some good news, I think there always is that reasonable component of what is a reasonable request. I don't think that the law makes a distinction as to who the requesting party is as to how that should be responded, but there's certainly some reasonableness that comes in. Now that's on the grandma side, the Utah Government Records Access Management Act. Now, unfortunately, with the legal side and a subpoena, that's a much harder argument to say, oh, I'm not going to give you those documents for the last 10 years because, you know, courts require that and they often do. That also raised one thing I noticed with some of the emails that you have. Some of you are using your personal emails and other things. I just hate to see us get in a situation where if there were some sort of litigation where our communications somehow became relevant and a subpoena were issued, that it would involve going to Commissioner Hell's house to get on her hard drive at home because she used her personal email address. And so just be mindful of that and recognize that those possibilities. I'm kind of giving you the bad case scenario, but I feel like I need to do that to hopefully help us avoid those type of issues. And perhaps Chair Facer and Gordon and I can discuss whether setting up specific email addresses specific for this type of business might be in our best interest to just streamline
We can
things.
ask Gordon to address it, but I believe we now have official state of Utah email addresses for all of the commissioners. It's on your business cards, and we'll have the staff help you figure out how you actually access said email.
That's great news.
And I will inform you that every time you do it, you have to get a special push notification to your phone. And they're very sensitive about the security of the state system, which I appreciate. But it does mean that it requires a little bit of tutelage.
Well, and that's great news. And then I guess my advice there would be any business involving the commission, make sure you're doing it within those channels. Because even a text message from your personal phone, those are documents that can be subpoenaed. And if you're doing those type of messaging and doing business over the text phones, that is a possibility that it would have to turn that over.
Let me add one other thing. I'm no longer practicing law, so I don't have the confidentiality of my clients. But oftentimes as a legislature, I would get an email from a client on a very personal thing. And then at the end of the email, they'd say, oh, by the way, you're in the legislature, make sure you give education more money. I always wondered, does that now mean everything in that email? Remember one time I got an email from somebody that I knew very well. They were a client of mine. And they said, you may not know this, our daughter's having mental health issues. So we really want you to fund mental health issues in the legislature. And that was all on my law email. And I'm sure Justice Durham, Commissioner Durham, may have some issues that way as well with her legal practice. But they may add something to a legal email that you really didn't ask for, but it suddenly brings it into this scope.
And those are difficult challenges, and any way that we can find to minimize the risk of that, such as using your state email for that. Now, I will say you can redact certain things, and it's not like they would have access or that you would have to produce any non-commission related business. Even if it was embedded in another email, we would redact anything unrelated to the commission. But it's just that process. You don't want to, and trying to minimize that type of scenario, I think is
And
in their best interest.
costs as you do.
It's expensive, yes. So I think we can all agree with that.
Screw it.
Well, I apologize for how long this was, but yes, Commissioner Hale.
I'm sorry, I just had one question, Mr. Chair,
Please.
back to these proposed criteria and districting standards. So I know we talked a little bit about just, it seemed like we were all in agreement that we didn't want to have, that we weren't going to look at certain records, or we weren't going to look at addresses of incumbents, that kind of thing. Did we want to put that into our criteria or our standards? Here in the statute, it says the commission may adopt a standard that prohibits the commission from using specific information. So I didn't know if we wanted to add those into our standards as well. And then the second question was, do we want to decide on an amount of time that we'll have these posted and a deadline for any input on these? And I appreciate what Commissioner Bishop said as well. Rob, about that there are some legal things in here that we must meet for sure, but just to get input back on these, do we want to
Sure.
decide a certain time?
If it's okay, I'll work with the staff to figure out the deadline and let you all know as we look at kind of the time, but ideally to have it all done before we have to take any action drawing any maps with any real data.
Great.
Same reason? Okay.
Oh,
The other piece, I think from what I've heard, there is some interest in the commission in articulating that we don't want to use that other data. And so I guess, Matt, if we could ask you to draft some additional language around that set of issues, that would be helpful.
For addresses.
Yeah, the addresses and the other political.
If we want to include that. I'm just
Incumbent or
throwing
anyone
that out.
thinking of running in that district.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, with that, thank you very much, Matt. We appreciate you taking the time, and I know we've worn you out tonight. We've earned your keep, so to say. Let's take, so the next item on the agenda is a mapping exercise, and I appreciate that we have some of our volunteer GIS experts with us. But I'll stipulate that we'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll reconvene here briefly to get some instructions from Gordon and the staff on separating into rooms to actually practice with the maps drawing software with our GIS experts.
You destroy what we've done.
So and we're using 2010 data so that it doesn't count.
do is we want you to divide up into two
I want to show you what you should visualize and see. So down here in the bottom is the population of each of the districts. So you have unassigned, you see roughly 200,000 residents in 2010 are not assigned. Your target for each of the districts is 95,306. And this is how far it is off from that target. This tells you what's totally there. So you'll see this light blue. This is unassigned people. So I had taken these from district 13, 14. Okay, Autumn took these from 13, 14, 15, and 10. So if we go to those districts, you'll see that 10 is off by 53,000, 13 is off by 49. And so what you're going to be able to do is go up to a big screen in the room. You'll see these census blocks. They have the option of, so let's suppose this is District 14. They select 14. They can select this block and that turns into 14 and changes the numbers. They can also take this command and take a whole group of them and it changes the number into that group. Now there's no right or wrong. There's no dogs in the fight. We just want you to have the success of finishing a map that has, and then they're going to run a check to make sure that you didn't leave islands and you left things connect. It's going to do the constitutional test on it. Not that it's a great map, but it'll be done. And then we're going to come back and talk about our experience. Yes. Commissioner Durham, you were getting ready to say something.
No, I was just raising my eyebrows in terror.
And so, hey, listen, I've talked to these GIS people. They're nice. We made them eat, so they're not hangry. It's going to be fine. And so what we want to do is just have you have that experience. Now, I'm going to add one more caveat to this whole thing. When you went to that commission and they talked about privilege and all the discussion and people being able to use it, we're going to make it really easy for them because in each of these rooms is going to be live on YouTube. So when you actually do it, every line, every line
Yeah, all
you
that
draw will be
discomfort just
done
got
live, so the public
pushed
can
away.
flash between each one. And so which one of you is telling the best jokes or the funnest room is going to get the audience. But the intent is that everybody will see exactly how every map is drawn. This is not a situation where you go into a room, come back with the map. They'll see how each one's done. Now, again, these are just, we're doing a lot of experimenting up here to make sure it works well, how it goes. But we want to see this process, and we have some plans for next week similar to this. So I'm done talking. Oh, I was going to turn this on. My mic's on now.
Oh.
All right. So is there any questions? Oh, GIS folks.
Yeah, I said,
Would you stand up and tell us about yourselves? And I want to comment on the GIS community. They are great. Jeff, Commissioner Baker got us connected with them. They have a group, their nickname's a little odd. It's called Slug, but Salt Lake Youth Group. But they come to the call. We have about 11 or so that work with us. And so this is great to have people that will spend time after they do it all day to come do it with us.
What do you want to know?
Who are you? What are you doing here? And where do you work? During the day, what do you do?
Okay, I'm Roger Gunn and I work for the city of Orem. I'm a senior developer analyst and GIS guru, administrator type. And I thought this was a rehearsal for Glee or something, but I guess I'm in the wrong room.
Hi, I'm Jessie, and I used to work for the state of Utah for 8 years from 2009 to 2017 up at the Capitol. And I was actually there when we were trying to use 2010 maps. I wasn't actually directly involved. But for the last 4 years, I've been doing GIS in the humanitarian sector in the Middle East, and I just moved back and I have a remote job, so doing humanitarian mapping. That's me.
Hi, my name is Karen Kurdoff. I work for the city of Taylorsville. I am the GIS person there. There's just me. So I was just excited to get the opportunity to be involved with the state because I've seen the local level and I was interested in redistricting and seeing how that process goes. So.
All right, so now we need the commission to break up into teams of two. Two of you are going to stay here. If Bill's online, he'll be with that group, and then the other 4 will be escorted to conference rooms on the 3rd floor.
So I know Commissioner Durham tried to snag Commissioner Baker. And usually there's in economics something called the first mover advantage, but I'm going to overrule her and I apologize. Just because I think it'll be easier if we just say the two people closest to each other. So we'll have Commissioner Durham and Commissioner Bishop, and we'll have Commissioner Hilliard and Commissioner Baker together, and Commissioner Hill and Commissioner Thorne and I will stay here in this room. No, and already slipped out. I was going to ask, what room are they being escorted to?
We'll take them upstairs.
Okay,
To start walking, you'll be escorted.
Find,
I bring your water bottle.
Can I leave my stuff here?
Oh yeah, you're coming back here.
only if you trust me.
What time do we convene?
So why don't we, what time's it right now? Why don't we say a half hour within,
6:06. So 6:35.
okay, why don't we be all back here at 7? And if you didn't finish, we're gonna want, no, we will not. This is, there's no winners or losers. This is only success. We're all winners.
And if you're done before that, come back and hopefully we can reconvene earlier.
If you get done, come back soon.
You're leaving. Yes.
Give me something to work.
What's that?
We're coming back here.
I've got it all set up.
Are you coming upstairs?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
If you're talking, I can't hear anything. I heard Gordon earlier, but I can't hear anything you're saying.
Bill,
Okay, and we're room 1.
it looks like he's muted.
Okay. Yeah, step away from this.
Okay, why don't you sit right here?
Okay.
Your room 1, so
Yeah, he has permissions whenever he gets back.
will you bring this
I still have no sound at all coming from the room.
So Bill, you should have some sound now. They had the room on mute while they had chaos going on.
Now I can hear you.
Fantastic. And we can hear you.
I have used
Which one are they standing in front of? The
not used.
That one's not very good. That's how I'm standing in front of like specific.
It looks like the sound is coming from Joey's computer.
Joey is managing it, yes.
Yes. And Commissioner Thorne, are you planning on using a camera? Do you need me to pin you?
You're asking me a question. I have no idea what you're asking.
Are you planning on using your webcam or are you just doing just your voice?
I have a webcam, but it says the host has stopped my video.
Nice to meet you.
So Karen and Rex, what I'd like you to do.
Okay, you should be able to
come to this map, so she can zoom in right into the details. And you have, this is the example. So 13, 14, 15, and 10 are off by 50,000 populations. And so.
You can see all those, right, Bill?
Yes.
Yes.
And so what I'd like you to do, instruct her how you want to change these districts. I just arbitrarily did, so this one is Davis County, I did one in Salt Lake and one in Utah County. And so this is what I think the process could be like, so that you can.
And that's like the big reason.
And then you can watch and see how close. Oh, go up to create. Actually view. And hit show target. Here. So that just shows you what you're trying to get to in each of those districts. So you will be able to see and instruct her which areas you want to come. If you want some of this to come up here, some of this to go around, however you want to do it. I just want, because this is.
We're just doing 13, 14, and 15.
Well,
And 10. See some of them.
yeah, yeah, these ones are all
Off by a
Yes,
little.
the 10's off by 15.
Oh, yeah, John.
yeah, so I think you need to fix those 4 districts.
Yes.
And
Oh, my God.
there's no, right now, we're not looking for rhyme or reason. All we want to do is,
So you want to walk up there, Karen, or do you want to do it from here? Sure.
does that make sense what I'm having you do, or?
Sure, except Joey just took away our map. Oh, I'm sorry.
Scooch over this way, so I'm not here.
Where was the screen? Oh, yeah, I wanted to find.
Okay.
There's your.
So one question I have is,
And is this where
these right here, I was wondering, Hooper could be considered
Okay.
interest with these areas right here. So, so that's just one question I have.
Totally fine.
Sure.
This piece right here.
The other thing that I noticed, and we can't see it right now, but right up here, there's a piece that looked like it.
Scroll down.
Yeah, this one. Oh, actually, not even connected.
They're not connected. That
So we got a
doesn't.
continuity problem.
Yes.
This is using the old census.
Oh, sorry, I was looking down. Can you point to that again?
Yeah, so this area
Oh,
here is not
Not
connected with this
connected to that.
area. And so, can we do one of those rectangles to at least connect them?
Now, we lock the other ones, so you won't change 11, so you can, won't change that district.
So but you're suggesting that maybe come down here?
Yeah, something like that. So
So
at least
could you
start our
expand this
continuity.
piece just for us right here?
But it would look more like that square chunk of District
We
13
had it.
this cycle.
Okay.
Then it would look
You
like.
gotta give me this.
Oh, because I think I need to say what district
Oh,
it's
you-
going
you're-
to.
yeah,
Oh, right, sorry, you have to
Or
select it.
Yeah, so we want to go to District 10.
Equity for congressional districts.
And then you do it, and
Because
then it
the
works.
sizes of the blocks will all.
Guys, we're all learning together.
Or maybe bring it down.
See that? Boom.
Oh, look how beautiful that was.
Now look at
So you want to come down a little more?
Yeah, I do.
So let's see,
So 10.
they want you to do some more down.
I could be missing.
Do you want me to?
Maybe that, are we following some kind of line right here? If we were able to,
You can follow that.
okay.
You just need to
So-
zoom in a little bit, and then you can.
And then I can select, right?
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, this looks like it would be something that would be either natural or man-made.
Yeah,
One here,
like a road or
a
something.
road,
And so it's just.
even like this
Chunk
one.
of the size there.
Yeah.
What about this one, Jesse, right here?
So she just picked up this one.
Okay, good, okay.
We just have some islands now that we need to.
I'm also learning the tool as I go.
Could you zoom out just a little bit?
Yeah,
just so we can-
Um,
Or, yeah, zoom out.
by the way, we're gonna take a few random pictures. Yep, district English.
You guys look really good pointing at the map.
I can't tell you how, you guys look so official.
This is my jam.
Okay, so what do we have right here?
So,
So it's an island. So,
Okay.
on the
Yeah,
side
clean
here.
that up.
So yeah, let's clean that
Yeah,
up.
let's clean that up.
Yes.
let
All those little pieces, so we're adding to District 10 right now.
Yeah.
So we have wiggle room.
I was gonna ask.
Yeah, so we're still off by quite a bit, right? We're still off,
So
by-
we
we need
can
another
take-
40,000
So we can
people.
take all these little pieces, Jesse, and put those into 10.
Yeah, yeah.
That's one. As long as we're following this. And I guess we can zoom in more on what it is. It seems like it would just be nice to clean this edge off.
Could we come up like up
Uh-huh.
through here?
Yeah.
It seems like a major artery.
Uh-huh.
And it's unclear, and I'm still kind of drilling down on what I could or could have, but it's, there's also just.
Yeah,
kind of
see.
optics.
A tiny little block.
Okay.
Yeah, we're only off by 40,000, so.
All right, so we were thinking, Jesse, of, let's see, just zoom out again.
Yeah, it was
a
that
little
road.
bit. We're thinking of following this line. Where are we?
Yeah,
Yeah,
this one here,
Oh, that one, okay.
yeah, or a road of some sort.
This one right here.
yes.
Yeah. See what that captures.
See if we can, like, start here, yeah, just follow that down. Very impressive, Jesse. Okay, all right, we're at 33.
Yeah, I think she's, yeah,
That's looking very nice. I
yeah,
like this line.
yeah, I like the line. Yeah, we're only off by 30,000 though. No,
What's this little guy doing up here?
yeah,
13?
can you take us up just a
Okay,
little
we
bit?
need to clean that up.
Yeah, I wonder if we actually changed that section from 13 to 10.
Okay, again, can we try to follow
Yeah, that
this?
road there, yeah.
Something-
It looks like mostly railroad.
Yeah,
So there might not be that many people, but.
but at least let's clean up the
Yeah,
line.
yeah, so maybe, Josh, if we could do this, and,
Oh, wait, okay.
yeah, so if we take this, is that what you were?
Yeah. I like that.
Okay. So some census blocks do that weird thing where it,
Yeah, it actually goes across our,
yeah, I can zoom in to make sure that's what's going on. Oops. What's here, right? Yeah. Yeah, that looks like it's for some reason.
oh yeah, so that's a whole census block. So
So it doesn't follow.
as much as we'd
doesn't
like to
follow that
stay
road
here, we've
exactly.
got to pick up this little,
And that's what Commissioner Bates is saying. Causes involvement.
And they might be better in 2020. I do think there was more data sharing
Yeah, they did
from the
a lot of
local
work.
ups,
At least we've
so,
been told they did a
Yeah.
lot of work to
Yeah.
clean those.
yeah, they were not great in 2010.
Oh, could we,
Zoom back out.
well, or I was actually wondering if we could zoom in on that area where we were just.
Yeah.
To see what's in here, that corner.
Oh, this weird.
This municipal right here, what's right in here? So what?
This thing right here.
Yeah.
I think this is the type of thing. Does it tell us what?
Yeah, right now we're not seeing.
So this is the information that's about the block right now. I'm imagining there's gonna be,
About this census block right here.
yeah, those are all codes. Oh yeah, because they're demographic codes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I mean, that is a good point. Hold on, there might be. Are there layers like the city boundaries? Like are there mapping layers to add to this?
I thought the city boundary was on there.
We're saying, and if we don't have it now, we can add it eventually. I mean, that is one of the things we can add.
All right, zoom out again.
Under like It should be like
That's a boundary. Or
line.
something.
Oh wait, over here, districts proposed, no.
You can add layers. No, it's section.
It's the Ogden Airport.
What we should do is when actually federal blocks don't really
So this is all.
follow municipal boundaries, right?
It looks like Ogden's been. split.
That looks like it's
Yeah,
Highway
actually, it's
84 coming down. Could you go south and add that in?
The city limits.
Oh, except we've got a couple of unincorporated
Yeah.
spots to.
Yeah, I was gonna fix that real
close in.
fast.
Thank you.
Could you zoom out?
Yeah.
Just so we could see where municipal lines are.
Yeah, we're realizing that we need to improve that on the tool. The- We're trying to find the municipal boundary, right?
Yeah.
What the-
Okay, so.
Yeah.
So looks.
Yeah.
Oh, and here's lots.
And there's Washington Terrace and South Ogden.
So do we want those?
Yeah, probably, yeah, because Washington Terrace comes up
Yeah.
this way, right?
So do we need to tweak this?
So, yeah, I wonder how much, if we capture all of this down to this line? Because we're off by 30,000 still.
So we could take in this piece.
Yeah.
Okay, Jesse,
Mhm.
we're wondering, we want to come down here to Clearfield line. We're assuming that's, we assuming that's.
Yeah, so,
It's a reasonable assumption to me, so.
oh gosh, you zoom in and it gets so. Maybe less is more. So follow like this line right here.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, that pretty much captured it.
That was surprising. I didn't think there would be that many people there.
And we're down to 6,000 people now.
Yep.
So what if we captured these,
Well,
This-
definitely that one maybe. These ones?
ooh, yeah, maybe not all of it. Maybe this one goes along that.
Yeah. Let's try it. These census blocks are funky shapes.
I say, Bill, you can always tell us where you want the lines drawn too.
Is this our piece?
These those-
highlighted things.
We're now down to 5,000.
Doing something,
Shall we go try one of the other ones? So, Jess, let's work on District 13 now.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yep.
Yeah. This looks like it's fairly populated too.
Okay, Jesse, can you take us down?
Yep.
Here, maybe to West Point, we'll see where we.
To zoom in a little bit
Well, no, just capture this area right here.
for District 13.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Yep. All the way down to here,
Well,
right?
wait a second.
Oh, we just went over.
So some of that.
Actually, let's stay right there, Jess.
Okay.
Because we're at 668 people
What-
over.
What if we got this right here?
Do you want me to add it to 13 for now?
Sure.
Okay.
So 3,600 people over now.
Wow, that's a densely populated block.
So what if, with this line right here, these 4 blocks,
Uh-huh.
what if we undid those? Took those back to unassigned.
To unassigned.
Number one.
Yep. There we go.
Yeah, so
Now we gotta go back to see. Now we're at 1,500.
now we're 1,400 under. So we either capture about half of this, or maybe we try one of these two.
Do you want me to zoom in a bit so you guys can see
Sure.
what the geography is like?
There's Hooper. Upper.
Yes.
Okay.
It's Hopper.
Traveling around.
Hooper.
It reminds me of when I was a freshman, I had friends who were from Tooele. And I knew where Thule was because we'd driven past it on the freeway, but I had no idea where this Tooele thing was. Yeah.
You said Thule.
Okay, so I'm wondering, what if we went here? I don't know how densely populated this is, but what if we took this, so we still kept this piece. If we went up like that,
Mhm.
District 13, but we were able to encompass this.
Okay, so drop
I see what you're
This
saying.
set-
Swap it.
and,
Okay.
and capture this set.
Yep.
Or something like that.
Let me add first. All the way down to here?
Or
Just-
we're thinking maybe to here, is that, I don't know.
Yeah, about there.
And all the way over to this line, yeah. And then,
And then remove that other one, yeah.
So we were over by 2,400. And so now, let's see.
We
what
remove
goes-
this one too?
Yeah, let's remove
the
that one
line
to start
right.
with. Yeah,
Wait, we gotta go back. We're under.
oh, we're under by 1,500, but we're,
okay, so what if we took all of that? Does that put us way over again?
yeah.
Except for the densely populated area?
So, or at least maybe let's start with this area here.
Huh?
255 under.
Okay.
Let's try that next one. Well, that was not very helpful. There were like 7 people or something.
Okay, let's try the next one. Oh, okay.
Now we're over 702.
Okay.
So without that one, we were under by what, 200 and something?
248.
Well, let's stop it
Okay,
being
let's-
248 under. So let's go ahead and undo that one.
Yeah, I was thinking, because that's pretty close that. Yeah. Did I do that right? All right. That was me. Is there an undo?
Yes, under unassigned.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, right there. Wait, so let's check to see. Oh, it's one.
Yeah,
So we're moving to unassigned,
yeah, those, yeah, that couple that,
and I think that'll be. Oops. Wait. Sorry, so we wanted to add that back.
yeah, let's add that one that had like 7 people in it.
I think it might have been unpopulated.
We get rid of our dangling modifier?
That little guy?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, is that part of that? Yes, I think we can.
No.
Oh, not
that's-
yet. Okay, sorry.
I know, we got excited, yeah.
Oh, okay.
But 313, I mean, that's still
Okay.
pretty good, right?
I mean, these are all census blocks here. See, we were kind of zoomed out, so we couldn't see that detail. I don't know if that helps. But, it's not like all this block, all this block.
Yeah, I don't think there's an easy way for us to capture it without it making it look
And,
odd.
and
This is why we need those special sites.
easier for people to identify with.
We're on the east side or west side.
Roads rather than identifying by a census.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, so let's zoom out one more time, just so you see where we are.
Okay, so, yeah, let's try 14.
Sorry, these colors are kind of similar.
No, that's okay.
So 14, should we try taking?
Oh, yeah, let's change it for their eyes.
Over.
Is that better? Wait, let me make it. There we go.
Seems to me we want to try to keep it clear filled.
As much as we can
Uh-huh.
together.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know where we are with 15.
so what if I don't know what that line is, but what if we kind of came down
Yeah,
here,
can we try that? Just.
Yep.
For 14.
just below the clear field? Yeah.
Oops, sorry. Undo. Oh, I think I know why it's doing that. I think I need to zoom in. It has to do with those census blocks not being. There we go.
We're still a ways off.
Yeah, so can we try this?
Well, we were gonna do that whole highway, right? West of the highway. Is there a line tool?
Yeah, that one, right. If you do that one, select, you can make your own sheet.
Oh, they had this one?
Yeah. And then
Yeah,
you,
this one I
you
think
do a
I did
dot
the.
for each one.
Okay, so just like. I draw a line like that.
Yep. And then when you're done, double click.
Ah, thank you.
Oh, now we're down to 4,000.
Yeah.
Good.
Wait, so we're negative 4,000.
I was gonna say, yeah, it looks like we split Clearfield. So, yeah, so,
I'm gonna zoom back out.
yeah.
Well, this is hill.
Hill. Yeah, obviously that is.
Yeah. So. Clearfield, is that Clearfield there? It seems to me that this might make sense for a line for 15.
So could we bring this down, put that back in together? This is still our.
Yeah, that's still unassigned,
our
yeah.
unassigned. Okay, so yeah, let's try doing this for 15 and see where we get with that.
It's a weird. Like just kind of, yeah, that whole thing up. Good shout.
Oh, we're just over a little bit. Now we're over, oh, not too bad still.
So what if?
Yeah.
Okay, so.
So we're over by 3,000. So,
We're not doing anything with this up here, is that correct?
no,
District
that's District
10.
10, we already did that.
Yeah, we already, so that one is,
Yeah.
but it's also under.
Oh, we need to add more to it though. So we're off by 1,000.
So could we?
So we're a little bit heavy on 15, right?
Let's see, could you come down here a little bit? Just so.
So what if we dropped this little piece right up here? Yeah.
So, sorry, which piece?
So, well, first, let's drop this one.
Do you want me to move it? To
Oh, yeah,
the
move it.
Signed or to District 10?
Move it to 10.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we're still under on 10.
You also have a little island of 10.
Oh, yeah, that one there, right? Let's,
To the left of there, you have an island.
yeah, this one here, Bill,
Yes.
Yeah.
let's pick that up.
Should we just assign it all to 10
Yeah,
for
let's
now?
assign all of this right here to 10.
Do
Still,
this for fun.
I don't think that changed at all.
You have two islands underneath there.
Yeah, yeah.
And these two, I think we'll try and put back into 15.
Yeah, they're in 15.
This guy.
I think it's just, yeah, the base map.
That, well, or what's, yeah. Okay, what about these? Are we following?
So this is the golf course.
Yeah, if we go back, are you looking at District 10's numbers?
Yes. So we need to find us another 1,700 people.
We,
You have a little protrusion coming out on the lower right if you add the gray part just above it.
Yeah, we need another 1,600 people.
What's someone saying on the phone? Are they?
That little protrusion that's coming out of the right side, just take the gray part on top of it.
Oh, yeah, that one right there. Good call, Bill.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, well, it didn't have very many people in it.
Yeah, there's a couple places we could clean up here, so just let me know.
Yeah, let's try and capture some of this right up here in South Weaver.
Yeah, could we?
I'm down to here probably. Oh, that's a
Cool. Yeah,
funky census block.
oh, good. Okay,
Look at-
we're 101 over. Oh,
Okay, can we get this little guy right here?
and can we zoom in? This is just an odd census block, I assume, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think it's this one right here.
Okay, can we? Let's-
Yeah, if you can see here, so we're a little bit over right in this.
Are you going to get rid of that tail?
Well, yeah, let's,
It has to go somewhere.
well, but if we put it
On a side,
with,
yeah. I guess as long as it's not on the
oh,
edge.
that's unassigned right now. Okay.
For a minute. Oh, look at this.
Oh, well,
Look at that.
no, yeah, so we're 90 over right now. That looks,
That's good.
yeah, that's fantastic.
That's a margin of error.
Yeah.
Was that the big?
Is this piece here? I see-
Yeah, that's a census block that's missed, so it is a little awkward, isn't it? I could add it to see how many people were added.
See how many.
Okay. So it has like 25 people?
Oh, yeah, let's,
Okay, well, that's okay. So
yeah, let's have them.
okay, so let's, 10 is looking pretty good.
Yep.
Okay, so now, let's do that.
Let's go down.
11 is green.
So 13, we're 480 shy.
Okay, 13.
So what if right here, we tried to pick up a little bit for 13?
Is this a major? What? Let me see what's here.
I think that's I-15.
Oh, for I-15, then yeah, let's not cross it.
Let's go over to the left. Were there some to pick up over there?
Because
Yeah, I wonder about picking up something up here.
maybe these blocks here?
Yeah, move those to 13. Okay. What about this one here?
Oh, sorry. Which
The
one?
next one to the left? No, that didn't get us very much.
There's not many people. I mean,
Not
it's
many
not,
people live out by the,
are we out
You
by
have
the
a-
causeway?
You have a yellow island up there still.
Yeah. Well, do we want to keep that?
Yeah, this little piece up here.
Okay, yeah, I can raise that.
so we're 300 short. Yeah, what about one of these two? 300 short.
I think that's Marsh's.
What if we went this way?
All right, can you point again? Yeah,
Yeah.
that.
Like here.
Okay, yeah, let's try it.
Now we're 800 over.
What if we took off this?
And assign it back to
So,
14.
so move this piece back to 14.
Okay.
And now the 13's within 190. That's pretty good.
Oh,
14 we're off by 5,000.
We still have.
we still have all that unassigned area.
So we've got,
We gotta figure out.
yeah, so we've got a little island of unincorporated. Started with Hill.
Just need to take it out. Or
Where you start does determine where you finish. I think I
15.
heard that once or twice.
Yeah, these ones, I think. So District 15 is a little bit over.
Just remind them that for District 14, they're mainly gonna have to flip.
Let's back in.
Yeah.
So they don't mess up.
Okay. We'll see.
Well, if we grab all of this in 14, how much is it?
Yeah, should we just sign everything and see what happens?
You have an island of 14 that crosses not an island, but a little protrusion that
Sorry.
crosses that highway. Yeah.
Well, you guys are saying, you wanted me to try adding all the?
Yeah, let's capture
of
all
Hill?
of Hill Air Force Base in 14.
Yeah, let's try it. Oh, that's gonna mess it up. Yeah, if I clicked in the wrong spot. There we go. Yeah. I'll have to fix this, but this is. There's probably a way to automatically assign everything. But
Oh, yeah, I thought we'd have a lot more.
Okay,
We're
well,
still,
that's okay.
Yeah, let me, yeah,
well, there may be,
Yeah, let's, okay, so let's clean these up.
let's fix it. Yeah.
Revise it to 14.
Oh man, those like skinny census blocks.
Okay, so could we take this?
well, but 10, where are we at on 10?
Let me check. 115 over.
Wondering if we could put, so 10 is. Probably look to see what that was.
Yeah, I don't know.
Golf
Let's,
course,
let's
is
look at that, Jess.
Yeah, so District 13 is 800 over, which is this one up here. How did that happen?
Well, what if we, this section here?
Mhm.
What if we undid that piece and put it in 14?
That helped. So for now, 13 is now under.
13 is 480 under, 14's 580,
It helped 14.
and 15's 590 over.
This little piece is-
So we've got to take something out of 15. And where are we at on
Put it
District
into
10?
115 over.
You're pretty close.
Yeah, 10's good.
Okay, so between 14 and 15. This seems pretty messy.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking we
You're,
want.
you're within 500 all of those, aren't you?
Yes. I think
I don't know,
500
you
and
get-
change.
I don't know you're going to get a lot better than that.
Where are we with 14?
Oh, sorry.
Fourteen and 15 could be adjusted just a tiny bit. Taking it out of 15 and adding it to 14. So one of those little fingertips.
Should we try down here first?
If you think of 14 as an eagle, there's a little wing fingertips, something right around there.
Yeah. I like your imagery, Bill.
Yes.
So
We're taking this and putting it in.
yeah, we're taking 15. That's what I was just trying to figure out. 15 to 14, purple to yellow. Or do you want me, let me zoom in a little bit because it might help to see the detail.
I wonder if we could.
Oh, that's too much.
Follow right there.
Oh, we've got a little unincorporated or.
Where? 15.
Shall we
Still
move up just a
take some-
hair,
We can take
please?
something from 15 to put into 14.
Yeah.
Or 13. So if we could scoot up here a little bit, Jessica, please.
I'd scoot up the map or the, yeah.
Okay, so
Pull it up in that very left-hand corner of 15.
go into 13 or 14. So
Oh,
could we take?
what's? Oh, that's.
Try to
10.
move it from 15 into 14.
Oh,
The
yeah.
very,
The problem is, yeah,
very left-hand corner of the top.
this little one here.
Yes.
Just that, you guys want me to try that little corner?
Yeah.
Now you're under 400 difference.
So
Okay.
13's under, so we take something 14 and
There's 14.
Where's 13?
You have a little unassigned area.
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah.
saw that. There's 13.
So we could take, is this the
13's
block- is this the
under.
block we tried and it just put us way over right here?
I think so.
When she zooms in, you can do it really detailed.
Yeah, because look, there's all those little houses.
Yeah.
You have a little blue strip. On the bottom right of the District 13, you have a blue strip.
Oh, right over here.
Good, Bill.
Yeah, good catch.
Okay, I'll look at it. So what can we take before?
So,
Is there something up here that we can take?
What?
Let's go up.
yeah, but one of the things that it appears to me, anyway, and we can still strive for it, but in order to get down to these kinds of numbers, we're gonna have to start making some weird lines, right?
This seems really weird to me right here.
Yeah.
Do you want to try
then-
and change it? We can always do undo.
Well, yeah, 10 is
It'd be-
right, spot on, right?
It'd be interesting to know what this has done though to the city lines in there.
Yeah.
Can you overlay the city lines on top of what we've done?
I don't think we have it today, Bill.
But I think.
But we will.
Okay.
I think that's.
Might be a way.
Well, so just out of curiosity, what if we zoomed out again? And if we took,
What if we just grab some of this, put it in, and see if we
Yeah.
can lose?
10 is already 115 over.
Yeah, well, we want to make it worse.
Okay. We can move stuff in and stuff out. So wait, say that again.
So,
These funky mountain census blocks.
yeah, so let's capture some of those for 10.
Okay. Yeah, let's see who lives up the canyon. 30 people.
Okay, what about some of these further south?
Also to 10?
Yeah.
okay, what if we added this into 14? This
To
piece right
14?
here?
Let's go look to see the numbers.
Well, I
The
see,
14 we're over.
Oh, there were.
15 we're under.
the
So
15, I
add
guess
this
we'd
to
want to.
15.
Except for, except for I. Let's just-
Oh, sorry. 1, 2, 2. Yeah, so this is a golf course here. And then I think people live here.
If we, let's pick up some of that golf course any, oh, well, we can't pick up any of that for 15 unless we start at this end. Because we've got a continuity issue.
So the golf course shouldn't have many in it anyway.
That's right.
But what if we,
You
At
got
least-
to 14.
yeah. That should.
This one too.
Get 800.
It's not a great census block, is it? Because it has these like teeth.
Well, what if, okay, do we need one?
But you've moved 14 now, so it's over 800 more.
Take that out. This to 15.
So is this one census block here, Jesse?
Yeah.
So what if, and this block goes like this?
Yeah.
Okay. How about if we took this out, put it in 14, but we.
So we're up to over 870 over in 14. But we can always move it out later. Just
Right, what, and, well, what did you think if we lifted 15 to see if it could?
Yeah, let's add this for 15, see where we're at.
the whole thing. Okay.
Was this one census block right here? We put that back in 14 now.
Yeah.
We'll take something.
That little one. What about this one?
It's, for some reason, this is its own block here, and then this goes around.
Let's go ahead and put it at 14.
Now you're over 1,000 over.
And we're making negative progress, I think.
We can zoom out after and kind of do a big picture look.
What if we put 15 up here and we took something from 14 up there to go to 10? That makes sense.
Sorry, I got to there. What'd you say? Can you repeat? Sorry.
So we're now 455 over. With 15, I like that major road there. Part of the issue here is it can't get to this road without going through 15. Right? Well, I guess you could come here. So Karen was saying, let's go up a little bit and see if we can snag some from 14 and move it into.
Okay.
We got it. We're 1,000.
Oh, move it into 15, so it'd have to be.
Yeah, so we're 1,000 over on.
14.
So
We're also over on 15.
we're over on 15 too.
Right? Or 455? Let's check 10. 10 is under, so we can move one of these to 10.
Okay, so let's move this to 10.
Well, or what if we move
Sorry.
this piece back?
Yeah.
Just a note on time, Commissioner Bishop scoffed when we said 7 o'clock. It's now 4 minutes to 7.
Oh, boy.
Do you want me to add the golf course to 10?
Well, where are we in 14 again?
So 10 is negative 500 and 14 is over by 1,000.
So could we take?
Take the whole golf course area and the surrounding neighborhoods.
Should go to 10.
Back in.
Mm-hmm.
That puts us at 185.
Let's see about.
480. 340.
You have sort of a little tail in 14
Right here.
and 10. Yes.
This is a weird sense.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's just a riverbed, so it can go back into.
Can you move
Oh,
that?
sorry, I did the wrong one.
So 14 is now.
So 14 is close now.
21.
They're all pretty close. They're all.
They're all within 500.
Yeah.
13 and 14. Is there anything?
Go look.
Point. It's all-
13 and 14, if you take the bottom right corner of 13 and move it into 14.
Did you say the bottom right or left?
This one here.
That one. Okay.
I'm sorry, and move it into 13.
Here, this one.
Yes,
This is 13.
This.
move that to 13.
Now 13 is over by 500. What is it?
Too much.
What if we tried it on the other side? We tried on the other side? Over here, let's see if there's something over here.
By Hopper.
Try that one too.
Sorry, keep.
Get something from 14 into 13.
So what about these
Those ones, yeah.
here? Probably like 12 people living here.
There we go. Okay. And then these are long.
That's pretty good.
How about this piece right here?
Not very many people living there.
I think there's a high flood risk there.
What's this here, if we put that in? 13 was the one. Right? Let's snag that for 13. That's right.
Oh.
Wow. That's awfully close.
So it's just a road right here. Just out of curiosity, see what happens.
We want to find an area.
If they want to look at it like as a satellite.
Oh, we can change the base map. That might help you, right? Does this help? Does that help or does it make it?
I think when you zoom in, it will be very helpful. Yeah.
Because I liked those building footprints. I don't know about you guys, but I don't know. What was the default map? Streets, probably. Is you can you guys see, or is the screen too? There's building footprints here, so you can kind of tell. This block doesn't look super densely populated. They're kind of along the edges there.
So this is all one census block.
There may not be many people in it.
Well, no, there were a few hundred. It was enough to send us over by 150.
Now, they're coming back, so I think now go up to the submit button.
We heard that.
Yeah. Now,
Submit plan?
okay, Karen,
Yes.
do the check. Click on it.
Submit plan?
Yeah.
And then does it check it?
This is gonna check to see if, oh, you got 2 right, 3 right, 4 right. Oh.
Is that because some didn't have an assignment?
Must have a couple of little islands.
So if you go to district unassigned, there's probably some unassigned
Or
ones.
if we hit zoom to it, it'll take us to where those are.
And then you can,
They're all over.
there's a whole
It
bunch.
zooms.
Those are just the little detail bits.
Those can be cleaned up pretty easily. Like, go team.
Oh, that's a problem.
Oh, and you can't submit it until you fixed it.
Yeah,
That's,
you can't fix it.
thank you for letting me use this. Yeah, thanks. That was fun. You guys stayed.
Oh.
I think one of the things that tells me is that we can do it. Yeah. It also tells me that it's time consuming and exhausting. Yeah.
You can do it in a small area. It's much tougher to try and do it and go around the whole state and make it work.
Yeah.
Half hour.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So did Jeff and Lyle's group get it perfect?
The only thing we've ever heard of.
Yes, we did.
Jeff and Lyle got down to 1 or 2.
Here you go.
If Jeff's in the group, I think they need to be graded on the curve.
There's plenty.
So we were trying to get even the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Replacement.
It just stay down to under 100. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes it a lot easier. Yeah. I used to
All right.
work in state, so.
Well, let's go ahead and resume. Gordon, would you like us to process this exercise?
Yeah, so so what I want to do, so what I want to do is, we went through that exercise to draw maps, and it was kind of fun to watch. Commissioner Hale and Commissioner Facer do it because they actually started enjoying it. It was weird, but yeah, we're not assessing, we're just stating. And so it was, so I want to hear what your groups did and just kind of talk about, we have our GIS folks, and we just want to hear what went well, what would you like us to change, what things were helpful, which things were not. And that, so I really want to hear from you, what you guys think. And then we're going to take notes. And
Like that, because I'm a novice in this completely.
yes,
One thing I think that Jeff pointed out. One thing that Jeff pointed out is we need a laser. So it's easier for us to sit there and point on the map and do things like that.
Well, that's a good idea.
Definitely.
Sorry.
But I'd say this, the challenge I have in doing it is you start drawing lines without any understanding of where it is. I mean, I'm not familiar with Provo. I know University Street, Center Street, but all the rest of it, I don't know. And you see the 0 people, so that must be either a commercial business or a BYU or something. And I think I have no idea when we finally, I had the opinion, let's get the districts population-wise first of all. And then let's take a look at where the boundaries are. When the boundaries are really kind of crazy, then let's try and manipulate the boundaries so we get it, so it doesn't look so bad. But it's easy to sit there and say, well, put that block here. That gives us the count now we're within 200, let's quit. I have no idea how that looks out on the ground.
I understand. I like that. Well, good comments, I mean.
For me, I think starting rough, I think is taking big chunks of numbers and manipulating those and then refining, working on the refining process. Kind of gets the numbers down into the acceptable range. So I enjoy doing that or taking that approach anyway. Start big and then start taking smaller and smaller bites, and pretty soon you'll get to the numbers that you're looking for. Yeah, the comment about the laser pointer, I think would really help out our efficiency. I'm guessing all three, or those who were driving the computers on all 3 teams were saying left, right, up, down, and they're getting instruction from
East,
every
west,
person.
or west, east, as the
It's
case
off the
may be.
screen now, where now, back up. Simple laser pointer. As long as it'll show up on the screens would be quite helpful.
Yeah, we'll have to figure out, because I've seen laser pointers that ricochet off, and that
Yeah.
I think there are some that are set to work for screens. So I do like that idea.
I think one of my takeaways was that how appreciative I was of our GIS people. You know, obviously, it's a new environment a little bit, but it picked it up and just fine. And it eased some of the concern that I may have had about us not having somebody who was a redistricting line drawer. And so I thought that was very helpful from me anyway.
Yes, having the geographic features, the roads, the municipality boundaries, we were doing a house district, and that to have those layovers would be really helpful. And then we were talking about communities of interest too. So for instance, we had Davis County and northward, and we looked at Hill, and we were thinking, okay, maybe we should have started with Hill Air Force Base and then gone out from there. So looked at that community of interest first. So it was just interesting, different approaches to take. So it's good. It was a great exercise.
I'll let Commissioner Durham, she was the expert at it.
Oh, we want everybody's comment that we gets out of this
You gotta go.
cave.
No, you shouldn't have started with Hill, by the way. A lot of people and none of them ever vote, so it's one thing you learn. I think what what Lyle said actually was significant. If you know the area, it's much easier to make an informed statement of, it may look nice and square, but is that breaking something up?
Yeah.
So not knowing the area was significant. And however, the goal is to make it equal population. And that's the hard part. And the other thing that was negative in this experiment was you had a limited area in which you had to make your adjustments for that. If you were really doing a map, and we were doing a congressional one, you could go into some other element of the congressional district and see if you could find the 8 people that were there. But by and large, thankful that you could say when you want, to go to that and you realize which that we meant was that. Thank you for that. But we got them to with an 8 and 20.
2 districts.
Well, yeah, well, one was 0 to start with, so that helped out. And the other was we were within the 1%.
Yeah.
Even though we still had to get to one person, but.
If I could add, I'm reminded of a statement I heard very first on reapportionment. The first district's easy. It's the more you do, the harder it gets. Because you end up with someplace that you have all sorts of trying to blend it all together.
But they said the last district is the easiest.
Take what's left over and then they really get mad. That's Tooele.
Well, I'd like to underscore, I agree with Commissioner Hilliard's comments about, and I'm not sure how we're going to handle this as a commission. Obviously, our statewide visits are going to help, but at some point, we need to put together a primer on neighborhoods and communities around the state, because no one of us knows them all. And that of course wasn't implicated, or at least we didn't try to implicate it in our exercise today, but that was really hard. And the other thing was that the maps themselves, again, several people have commented on needing more information like geography, but also like housing representation. Are you dealing with neighborhoods full of apartment building or industrial things, or neighborhoods with single lots? Because that's really valuable when you're trying to get down to one person deviations. And this is my first experience with the tech, and our people were absolutely great, but it seemed a little clumsy to me. I mean, we'd say we want this tiny little sliver, and they'd have to find pentagons and things to accommodate our request. But I don't know if I assume that's just a characteristic of the technology. So
No, they're going to have to use the census tracts. And that's what's giving them the problems.
I see.
Because-
Okay.
We were told the next time the blocks will be so much better.
Okay.
It is true that last in 2010, they didn't use local data, and this time they are, because Utah actually has fantastic, really good local data, so we're really hoping that
good.
they used it. Because then there was data sharing agreements that were finalized after 2010.
Oh,
I make no promises, it's still.
We'll believe that when we see it.
Yeah. I hope
I'm an optimistic person.
that's very helpful, and I hope that's the case, because I did not find this I'm not a native speaker in this particular world, and it was challenging.
But Lyle is also right when he says, especially when you get to the legislative races, districts, there's going to be a place where they all come together, and we always call it the buckle. There's going to be some county that's not going to be happy with it, because you have to make some accommodations.
Bring everything together.
You can make these very nice, but at some place you got to make everything come together. And that county, you've just got to continue telling them that 3 representatives is better than 1.
Well, I believe you guys are gonna make it fantastic. So I'm just telling you, I'm very optimistic.
Gordon, let
knows.
me add one other thing. To me, I think because of the shortness of time, we really are not gonna have much time. I would really like to see maps they did in 2010 as kind of putting out to people and say, this is what the committee did 10 years ago. What don't you like about that? What in that map is not the community of interest or whatever it may be? Now, everybody will say, well, like I said, that nice joke, everybody can draw a district within 4 blocks of their house. That's all I want to draw, is that one district. But I think if you gave the people something to think about, and they said, well, I don't think you ought to put St. George and Cedar City together because they have rival universities.
Right.
That's something that I think we know, but I think that's the kind of information that would help me at least, trying to put community of interest. And I think the other thing is if we start from scratch and do everything all new, this has to pass the legislature. And I think we stir it up so much that nobody has the same districts anymore or information. I just think that our chances of getting it passed, I don't care what you say, is just zero.
And I was giving a really important part there. We had the maps, the 2020 boundaries by different colors, right?
2010.
Is that the assumption that we're going to have when we start dealing with the maps? You'll start with the 2010. We'll start with the 2010 district, and then you'll make accommodations from that? Or are you really taking everything out and saying,
So
go for it?
So what our intent is, tonight, you were handicapped and there's purpose in it. We just wanted to have you experience drawing. Not many of you, other than some of you, have drawn maps before. So we wanted all of you just to have drawn a map for a few minutes. We just wanted that. And then to kind of hear this. So one of the things Matt had said was, one of the criteria we could look at was to keep continuity from previous districts. That was something you're going to evaluate to us, whether you want. Bill, did you want to say something? I didn't even look at you.
I saw you typing it.
I don't know if he wanted to, I heard something, so.
Muted, yeah.
Oh,
No, I think you hit the microphone someplace.
all right. So what I wanted to say is that I do believe you'll have access to the old districts. I think that's something you're going to make a decision on. It's in the legislation that created you. And so in some fashion, you will decide to use it, discard it, consider it. I think there's value in knowing it for continuity purposes, but I don't think it's going to be your number one criteria. So you can think through it and you'll decide. I won't make you take it or not take it. And it was fun to listen to, I keep wanting to say Karen, but it's really Commissioner Hale and Commissioner Facer. They were saying, it'd be nice, just like you said, is this a industrial zone? Is this a golf course? What's here? And the numbers. And so giving you that kind of thing when you look at the each of the census blocks, I think will add. And then everybody kept referring to your number one thing is we don't know the area. And so one of the things we're doing is we're talking not just to the people in those areas, but we're calling every mayor in every city saying, what do you do and don't like about your district? Some of the mayors we talk to say, we love it, don't touch it. Others are saying, this is the absolute line we need taken out of our city. So we will give you that level of context. So Autumn has already drawn some maps of cities that have already told us what they do or don't want, but it kind of changes some of the voting boundaries. And so we'll give you a context, we'll give you all the comments, but then we'll summarize these by saying, this is kind of what we're seeing in this community, this community, this community, as you're working through, say, Davis County. This is what we're seeing. And so we'll have each of our interns who are talking to people give you context of what that means. But we're not gonna do that tonight. We didn't want you to have it that tonight. We want you to experience it. And then the other thing that Commissioner Hilliard said was, how do you start? And so we're gonna do an exercise next week on starting with a blank screen, starting with some context, you won't have a blank screen, city limits, counties, and those kind of things, but how do you want to start the process? So we had a finishing exercise, we're gonna do a starting, and then we're gonna do a in the middle context. So it'll be a lot of fun. Tess. Okay, I'll get going to the next item.
I was gonna say, I was gonna suggest that we hold the National Conference of State Legislatures conversation till next week. But I think the budget amendment and the kickoff are in the outreach, if we can cover those, it would be terrific.
Yeah, so let's, so we'll talk about that. I think we all learned a lot last week, but we'll talk about that another time. We wanted to get some feedback.
Just real quick, Commissioner Thorne, we forgot to ask you what your takeaways were.
You're on mute.
You're muted.
A lot of what being said is garbled, so I'm not sure if you were asking me something.
Yes, what your takeaways were.
I'm looking forward to being in the same room as the person who's drawing the map. It would make it immensely easier.
Thank you.
That's relevant. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about budget, but one thing you learn about marketing is you always show them the pair of shoes first, and then afterwards you tell them it's $200. You don't say it's $200, then show them the shoes. So we're going to show you the shoes first, then talk about the price. I'm going to show this. Show the TV spot.
And every resident deserves an equal slice. But this cake is not made.
I had my.
The microphone again, that makes it exciting.
And this is Utah, and every resident deserves an equal slice. But this cake is not made with vanilla and frosting.
Can you hear it if we
shared computers?
Just gonna send it out. Sorry about this. It worked really great in my office.
I told them we needed to have the cake here so we could enjoy some.
I should have thought of that.
Sorry about this. I'm glad I got a whole school of people. Correct this.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's.
There it is.
Oh.
I figured it out. We're sending it to him now. So I can focus on you again. So what we want to do is Love made us a commercial. I want to show it to you. We want to talk about why this is important and what we should fund to try to get. We were hearing of different commissions that were having a very good turnout, a lot of people visiting their commission meetings and so forth. How do we do that? And I think we have content now, but we want to get the contract to send it out.
Imagine this.
Hey, we got volume. There we go. Play in your minds what you saw before.
Imagine this is Utah. Imagine.
We're gonna be really good at this next meeting.
Give us another year.
And act it out if need be.
We'll take the pasta, that could be the cake.
Okay.
Line up. So I think you stop sharing. That's what I was trying to do.
The next item is somewhat contingent upon this. I think.
Yeah, so it's the price this year. So we wanted to start off with a big bang and
Imagine.
All right, there you go. Hey.
This is Utah, and every resident deserves an equal slice. But this cake is not made with vanilla and frosting. It's baked full of decisions, ones that affect our communities, our state, and even our nation. Every 10 years, Utah is tasked with creating equal and balanced congressional, state, senate, house, and school board districts. And this time, you're invited to the party. Visit UIRC.utah.gov to participate in the process, add your voice, and create your own maps.
it was worth the wait. Thank you for your patience. So what I want to do is, I have Aaron here. I want to talk a little bit about the kickoff, what we can do to help try to get some energy as we go in. We have 29 days before the census data is released. And so Aaron, take a few minutes and let me give you this.
As we presented a couple weeks ago, we've talked to all the different TV stations around and gotten proposals from all of them. And wound up going back and forth with several of them to negotiate the best buy that we could get media wise. After some negotiation came back that KUTV definitely gave us the best option, the best proposal. They've come back, and if we can do the $50,000 buy with them, they will more than double the investment. They'll more than double the match in number of spots. They're giving us a total of 238 spots, or 30-second spots throughout the remainder of July, August, September, and then into October. They've offered to run 65 PSAs for us to promote the public meetings that are coming up in September and October. They'll do at least 10, if not more, interviews with whoever our spokespeople will be to promote. Fingers are pointing at Rex. Apparently, Rex, you've been nominated, so congratulations on your nomination. They'll do, yes, all those, at least 10 interviews to coincide and promote the public meetings on their different news programming. And finally, as well, they've agreed to run multiple news stories as well on the whole process and on the UIRC as well. So our recommendation, if we can, would be to finalize a buy with KUTV, so we can put that into effect and have that up and running as soon as possible. And then really, once we have the census data and everything, really rely on them heavily to promote the public meetings. questions?
I assume what we saw here is just kind of the introductory. It's not the one that run the whole time. You'd have different ads, different than the one we just saw.
Correct. Yeah, we would do this one to really kick it off and then do additional ads as we get further along in the process.
So the legislature does should be all of a matter of public record. Have they hired an outside firm to handle publicity? You know?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Not that I'm aware of. No.
Because I think whatever should happen, we ought to be able to coordinate enough so people can come to both meetings if they want, or one or the other. I don't think we ought to appear as antagonists to each other. I think we ought to be as mutually working as we can.
That's right. Yeah, we could definitely reach out to and coordinate efforts with the legislature. I don't, have they published their dates yet? I haven't
Yes,
seen.
they-
Is it a?
Yeah, they just republished them with some updates in the last, 2 or 3 days, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
don't think they changed their outreach meeting number. They
It
have,
was just the addition of those at the Capitol.
yeah, they're gonna have 3 or 4 at the Capitol, which will be after we submit our plan. Plans.
You know, I appreciate what Commissioner Hilliard is saying. At the same time, though, I think we need to differentiate between the Independent Redistricting Commission and the Legislative Committee as well. So.
Yeah, but
how would we do that?
but not be antagonistic.
No, no,
You know,
no.
I think that's the important
Oh, yes.
takeaway that
No,
I have.
I think for sure.
And double up on resources where we can.
Exactly.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so now I want to
Go ahead.
Is any other TV stations or media involved? Or just KUTV?
At this point, just KUTV, just based on the budget that's available, or the budget that we're trying to confirm tonight. If more budget becomes available, we definitely reach out and involve other TV stations we will be reaching out to working with every media outlet possible from an earned media PR standpoint to get coverage.
KJAS was part of the contract, so it's KJAS and KUT. So those two would be the two carriers.
And for those of us who don't watch television frequently, remind me which number on the dial KUTV is. 2. Okay, thank you.
Has a certain.
Are there any options for public service announcements on PBS and KUER? Or has that not been explored yet?
We haven't explored that yet, but that's a great idea.
Sure, KUSU as well.
And yeah.
The one down in St. George, Cedar City, I think they've got a radio station.
And I do know some of the other media stations are interested. I had a conversation today with Channel 4 about possible story closer to the census.
Okay, so any more questions about kind of the TV contracts and the need for that, or, so let's talk about how we get that done. So you've seen this drawing before. This is our budget that we had approved and adopted. And you can see that we have a budget of $1,015,000. And we have assigned $924,370,000 of the funds been allocated. I'm going to draw your attention to 2 different ones. One is this $25,000 that we contracted with the state to set up our website, and also the $7,000 that we have put for the outside legal help. This is not Matt. This was the Attorney General. So those were just set aside for the help that they gave us in the initial stages. So we put together going to all the different locations that we were going to require hotels, miles and meals, figuring about 11, we just averaged 11 people per each of the venues. And this takes us all the way, and that's planning to spend nights at anything that's very far away, not that we'd always use that, but just really trying to be conservative through that process. We ended up with about $25,000 cost if we allocate funds for that. And so I want to take you to this sheet. So you see we have that fund balance of $90,000. The commission tour, don't know if that's the right term, but is about $25,000. So if we were to sign the 50,000 KUTV KJAS contract, we'd end up with about $14,000 left of fund balance is what cities look for, rainy day fund. And then I pointed your attention to the state contract. I've talked with Aaron, who works for the state, and their cost to do all the work they did for us was $14,000. But to keep the website up and running, there's additional $4,000, which leaves us about $69,000 in this fund that we're not going to spend. $6,900, yeah, $6,900. Our cost from the Attorney General is $2,700, so we have $4,300 of funds that we're not going to spend in that account. So what I'm recommending to the commission is this. I don't believe it does us any good to have this $50,000 at the end of in November. Granted, if there's value, give it to the taxpayer, not spending it. But my suggestion is that we do need at the front end now to get the word out about what's going on. And the social media, while in talking with Aaron, I believe this really needs to be closer to 30,000. This would get us started and get people aware of our meetings. They will start getting things in their social media account immediately, and we'll look at other opportunities to try to expand the social media as we go into this. So tonight, what I'd like you to do is, if you want to, is approve $50,000 of our $90,000 unencumbered to go to the media contract, and let us reallocate $6,900 from our website contract with the state and $4,300 that we had set aside for outside legal counsel for $11,000 for media service. So anyway, what questions do you have, and that's what we talked about.
So one of the things that I did want to highlight is that this still doesn't provide us any funding or resources for some of the kinds of analysis that Matt talked about, this statistical analysis and those kinds of things. Now, even if we use the whole $90,000, it doesn't get us to the numbers that Matt was talking about for the analysis. And so, just to keep that in our minds, I don't think that we don't do this necessarily. I just want to make sure we're clear that if there are things that we're giving up, but we're giving them up regardless.
I was going to say, we're not really giving them up because we don't have a chance of affording them.
Obtaining them, yeah.
Even whether we spend this or not.
Other comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Hilliard?
I have just two. I noticed on your list of places you didn't have the Cache County Fair, and that's August the 12th through the 14th, which is really a big deal. Much bigger than Rich County as far as getting people there and doing that. I just add that one to the list. But I'll say this, and I see even with our attorneys here, as I sat to that NCSL conference and listened to it, I know our attorneys are committed to $300,000. But the thing that concerns me as I read legal material that comes through my office, there's new theories coming up all over the place about what really is legal and not legal in reapportionment or redistricting. And I think we put our attorneys at a crunch at that $300,000 with all the new things that are coming out. And I just think we need to be careful to make sure we get to the end that we don't hold them hostage in an unreasonable way.
Matt and I have talked about this, and I think we're already planning to hold him a crunch even if we had 50,000. So I was just telling you that he is being very generous at this point. And after the meeting last week, I feel like it helped add emphasis to his point. So I do think there is a problem, but I don't know that 50,000. I come from a city, and usually you have a 20%, rainy day fund. The legislature has cut you off there, and so that's why the 90,000 was there. But I stepping out of my comfort zone and saying, we need to jump ahead, we need to make a decision and move forward. Matt has convinced me and the meetings last week convinced me that we really do need these analysis, that I don't believe the 50,000. I still think I want to try to find a way to do those things because I think the people of Utah, everybody deserves us to accomplish those things, but we're not clear on how that's going to happen. But I think we need to communicate today. That's where I'm at.
I should clarify, I'm not speaking against it as much as the fact that saying there's some things that we haven't really planned for that I think may really be a concern before we finish.
I agree with you.
Other comments? Please, Commissioner Hill.
So I do think that is a point of discussion at some point, that I think that analysis would really be helpful for our commission. And I don't know if there's even an opportunity to have that further discussion about where funds could possibly come from, or not. But I do agree with Gordon that we definitely do need to communicate now what the commission is doing and where we will be and how we will be asking for submission of information input into the mapping process. So I would make a motion that we approve the $50,000 this evening so that we can get moving on with our communication plan.
We have to do the other one too, the
Oh, with
11,000.
the amendment, yes, with the other funds coming from the website contracting them. Yeah,
I'll
the
second
remaining
the
funds.
motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second discussion. Please.
Can I discuss even if I
Yes.
second it? I just
I
kind of.
believe so. If somebody wants to take a Robert's rules.
Kind of off of the discussion that we had at a meeting for the independent commissions at the redistricting kind of conference. We came away feeling very far behind on outreach and public education and engagement. So I think we have to do this.
I think that was one of the things that was very clear from the conversations we had with other commissions. That in terms of public outreach, we were a step or two lagging. And variety of reasons. I think.
Well, not least that we're absolutely brand new and we're starting from absolute scratch with no staff. So, yeah. And these are some of the very established commissions. So.
Other.
I agree with the comments made. What do we have? Probably less than 25 people watching this tonight.
Yeah.
So if we're doing all this great work and trying to get publicity,
we need more than 25 people
that's
paying
right.
attention to us.
That's right.
Okay, yeah, so I have a motion and a second. Go ahead and call the motion. We'll do a roll call vote. We'll start with Commissioner Hilliard.
Aye.
Commissioner Baker. Aye. And aye. Commissioner Hale.
Aye.
Commissioner Bishop.
Sorry, no.
Okay. Commissioner Durham.
Aye.
Commissioner Bishop. Sorry. Commissioner Thorne. Sorry about that.
Aye.
Thank you. So the motion carries.
I have a question.
Please.
I wonder if Better Boundaries could do some type of fundraising for us. I mean, they've been outreaching and doing their work to do their work. They do some fundraising to give us some additional money.
So I'll refer to legal counsel. We have had some conversations with them around this issue.
And that's something we've explored and looked to. There's a number of problems in the way that this commission has been structured and set up by statute, by accepting funds from any outside entity, regardless of the nature of that entity, a 501c3 or a C4. We're still pursuing because that would be a great option if that were a possibility. At this point, there's been enough red flags raised that we really need to drill down to see whether that's possible or not. But at this point, I'm a little skeptical that that would even be a possibility.
Would we
Please.
want to ask for an AG opinion on that?
Possibly. I
That'd
would
be some protection for us.
certainly, if we were to move forward in anything like that, it would be nice to get
cover through an AG opinion.
If we got it.
Yes.
Other, comments, clarifications? Not hearing any. Gordon, did you want to touch on the public outreach?
Yeah, in view of the time, we won't spend too much, but I was going to just let you know that we're out with our interns going to, this week will be in Logan, Ogden, and Spanish Fork. And we have these planned out. We're just, our events and things, we're just going to keep going to all those locations, and we're going to continue that route. So we'll keep you posted. So if you want to attend, you'll get, you already get a shirt, but you could get a second one if you want. So
please.
I just asked Gordon, Commissioner Hilliard was referencing the current traveling schedule. For some reason, I don't know if I have that. Would you make sure that we get that in the event?
we'll email
list?
that to every tomorrow. So
Great, thank you.
The last item I have on the agenda is public comment. I don't know, have we had any requests for public comment online?
No emails so far, but there might be if you remind them that they need to.
Do we have anybody in the audience who would like to make public comment? Please, Commissioner Baker.
Different subject, the school district boundaries. We've looked at the congressional and the legislative, I think, pretty heavily, but I really don't know what needs to go into or what considerations we should look at for school district boundaries that we should be drawing. So I'd be curious to have a representative from somewhere in the educational or school district, state school environment, somebody that would maybe give us some guidance or hints or
Help us get the lay of
suggestions.
the land to some
Yeah,
extent.
to help us get a better feel for what is considered or what should be considered for drawing school district boundaries. So I just make that request.
Thank you. And I would add to that, the legislature's now made the state school board a partisan. The locals are not, but the state is partisan, whether that impacts the evaluation we need to give.
Okay. Thank you. Please.
Just a logistical question. Have we given any thought to changing the format of our meetings and having a bigger venue and inviting more of the public to attend our regular meetings? Or do we want to stay with our online presence? Of course, we have to worry about another surge of the virus. So
I think we definitely want to continue our online presence, but I don't think that should preclude us thinking about a larger in-person attendance. And I think that's one of the things that hopefully with the additional outreach and communication, we can drive more interest in our in-person meeting. I would hope that we can start doing that post haste.
thank you.
Please, Commissioner Hilliard.
If we do that, I think we need to alert the security. So either security of the building or Taylorsville or wherever, so that if we do have a public meeting, I hate to have somebody come really upset.
Thank you.
Your issues.
So we'll get staff to help us work on that as well. Any other items of discussion that anybody would like to raise? Not hearing any, a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much. And thank you. Good night. Thank you for joining us.